Fasten your seatbelt. I am taking you for the ride of your life. I'm going to show you what this car can really do. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Hang on.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hold on to your butts.
Forget him, kid.
To infinity and beyond!
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor at all.
So you can go ahead and ask me what you're going to ask me, and my natural response could be to get offended.
Well, fine, let's talk about it. Any thoughts of your own on this matter? Or is that your thing? You come into a bar, you read some obscure passage, and then pretend you pawn it off as your own idea just to impress some girls?
Just another American who saw too many movies as a child.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
All right.
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. One movie each week, 30 years in the making. In the year 1993, a century after the gunpowder had settled in the streets of Tombstone, Arizona, Hollywood revisited the infamous Earp brothers and the mercurial Doc Holliday. Under the vast azure skies of the American West, their story was retold, capturing the imagination of a new generation. Tombstone, more than a retelling of gunfights and outlaws, offers a window into the souls of men carved by hardship and driven by a code of honor now nearly forgotten. In this episode, we'll explore the historical truths and cinematic liberties of this epic tale. We'll uncover the stories of the men behind the legends: Wyatt Earp, the iron-willed lawman; Doc Holliday, the gambler with a lethal streak; and the fearsome Curly Bill, an outlaw with a quick draw. The hosts of this podcast are John Reed, Rob Perry, and Pat Canagallo. Pat Canagallo wept. It is a 30-something movie podcast. We are talking Tombstone this time. Around. And Pat, are you crying?
I am crying, John.
There's no crying in podcasting.
It was movies like this were the reason that this podcast came about.
Yes.
Right? I mean, oh my gosh. That's
it's movies like this that a young John Reed was like, do I want to make movies someday? And let's just watch this one again. Here's my life choice. I can either maybe someday make movies, write movies, be involved in some way with movies, or I could just constantly watch this one over and over and over again, and just wither away. Either choice is valid. I'm your Huckleberry either way. So, Rob, how are you doing?
I am so happy to be here to discuss this movie. And as much as I love this movie, I am going to have to point out just a couple of minor flaws that I find in it every single time I watch it. That I'm just going to say I love this movie. Yeah. I love this movie mainly for Val Kilmer's performance alone.
Absolutely.
I mean, you could take in some ways you can take a couple of the actors out and swap others in. And then I think about it and I'm like, no, this is perfectly cast. It has an ensemble cast of that guy. I made a list and I couldn't believe that I could have still gone from the list. So I am enthused to be here to talk about this wonderful Western.
Yeah. I'm so glad that we've got you here. Normally we have you on for October and we have the horror movies, but I think the last time we were together, you were like, hey, you guys doing Tombstone soon, right? I was like, yeah, we are. Can I be on that one? Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can. Yes.
Yeah. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I just want to say real quick, Rob, we sure appreciate you. First of all, like the friendships that we get to make through this podcasting thing are just awesome. It's so great to see you again. And also just so humbled, and thank you for your support and of what we do, basically just hanging out and talking about movies and having fun. So we very much appreciate you, and I'm really looking forward to talking some movies and getting down into the nitty gritty, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a little pull. And
there you go. Very nice.
I don't want, and please, John, edit this out if I'm stealing Rob's thunder, but Rob, you're talking about going down in the ensemble cast of, wow, it's that guy and that guy and that guy. I totally feel you. And the one thing I would add on is, yeah, it's that guy and that guy. And man, it's time for a cameo and you got that guy? What? Okay, so I don't know if you catch where I'm going with that, but I mean it's
I'm with you.
All right, so cool, so great.
Yeah, there was, and we'll talk more about this when we get into the trivia part here in just a minute. But even this time watching it, there were some, and I know I've watched this movie so many times, and I've watched all the way through the credits so many times, and for some reason, there's a couple of characters, there's a couple of actors, it just did not dawn on me who they were. And watching the movie this time, I was like, wait, that's who? That's his brother? Are you kidding me? Like, why did I not pick up on that? Like, and it just,
awesome.
and I turned to my wife and I was like, cause she watches this with me every time too. And I'm like, did you know that was so, and yeah, we're like, no, we didn't even pick up on that. So yeah, it just, this is, like you said, it's a who's who of Hollywood. And there are even just bit parts in here. There's just, nobody listening to this can see the chef's kiss, but it is, it is absolutely one of the, there are flaws and we'll get into that, but for me, this is one of those movies that I can watch this thing over and over again. There are a handful of movies that I feel like I used to have a Blu-ray or a DVD player, first one I ever bought for myself that I owned. And I don't know, I haven't even checked on some of my existing ones, but there was a feature in which you could just loop the movie and it could just play over and over and over again. I'm sure my players currently do that. I just have never done it recently, but there are movies that I would just pop into my DVD player. I'd hit that loop button and I would just let it play. And this is one of those movies that I think the 2002 Count of Monte Cristo, I could do the same thing. I could just play that one on a constant loop.
Good choice.
I think at the time, I could probably still do it now, but at the time I absolutely loved the just silliness and fun of the first Blade movie. That was another one that I think I could just play on a loop over and over again. And absolutely this one. I could totally just put this one on a loop and just watch it over and over and over again. And yes, if Val Kilmer was still capable of performing the way that he was when he was in this movie, if Val Kilmer wanted to put on a one-man show of just like one night with Doc Holliday, I'd buy tickets immediately and go see it. That would be phenomenal. So, well, we're going to get into this. We're ready to go. Like, we are ready and raring to go. So very, very quickly, we spoil as we talk. So just be aware of that. If we start to mention a movie and you don't want to hear anything about it for some reason or another, then feel free to just hit that little skip button a couple times, get about 10, 20 seconds past it. We're probably done talking about it at that point, but this is just kind of your only warning for that. So be aware. Make sure you visit our website, 30podcast.com. You can leave a rating, a voicemail. You could become a co-executive producer on Patreon. There's a ton of bonus content we've got out there now. I think we're almost, if not close to 50 bonus full-length Patreon episodes in there. We're getting pretty close to that. And then we've got a bunch of little Patreon shorts in there as well. So mixture of old movies, new movies, ones we just couldn't get to in our regular slate of movies that we do every year. So that stuff is over there, and it's a fun time. So head on over there if you want to check out more. All right. If you haven't been with us before, we kind of break the episode up into a few different little sections here. We've got the first section we call Trivia Pursuits, and that is where we get a little bit of information about the movie itself, the actors, the production of it. We give you a little bit of trivia in there, and then we do a quick little synopsis. We give you the trailer audio, and then we run down 10. We try to break it into about 10 major moments to do a quick overview of the plot, and we'll kind of, especially with this movie, we're not going to be able to help but interject in those major moments, and that's fine. That's where we kind of talk through some of the plot of the movie and whatnot. Then we move into our deep thoughts. And from there, we kind of talk more about our opinions of the movie and kind of how we think it holds up 30 years later, or maybe doesn't hold up 30 years later. Spoiler alert. We think this one holds up. So I think I can speak for everybody here and say we think this one holds up. And then once we have that, then we usually round everything out at the end with our 3 questions segment, where it is 3 questions that are somewhat related sometimes to the movie, often food related, although I don't think we have any food related questions this time around, although we often do. So, all right. So our Trivia Pursuits. This one was released on Christmas Day, 1993, rated R. Has a runtime, depending on which version you're looking at, there's a runtime of a little over 2 hours. Rob, I think you were holding up was it the DVD of the director's cut? How long is that one? What's the runtime for the director's cut version?
It's only 5 minutes longer than the theatrical.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Version.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've been going through my movie collection, and I've been trying to, when the 4K version for something is better, I've been trying to pick up the 4K and replace maybe some older copies that I've got. But in a lot of my digging, I have found different people who have said things like, nope, this 4K version of this particular movie is terrible. You want to get the Blu-ray, or stick with the DVD. The DVD was the best possible transfer. It's got the best extras in it. It's whatnot. Of the different versions that are out there, have you had different versions, and the one that you currently own, is that your favorite? Because all I have is I've got the Blu-ray copy of it that I replaced an old DVD copy with, and obviously it looks better than the old DVD copy, but I have never owned the director's cut. So is the director's cut a worthy purchase?
For me, I don't think so. There are two scenes that really that are kind of add a little bit. The main one, the first one, is where there's a scene where Kurt Russell and his wife, he's getting shaved, cleaned up and everything, and he comes into her room and there's like a whole bunch of empty Dilaudid pills, bottles, and he realizes how bad her addiction has gotten, and she kind of lashes out at him saying, I'm lonely, I'm cold, I'm alone at night, and she accuses him of having an affair with the actress, with Josephine, and she says, why don't you, in front of me, go up to her and say that she means nothing to you, that she's dirt? And he just kind of quivers and doesn't say anything, and then she kind of realizes that there might be something there. The other scene is when Doc Holliday, after Virgil and his Morgan's body get on the train and they're leaving. Right before that, Doc Holliday is saddling up his horse, and his woman Kate is trying to say, what am I going to do without you? And he's like, well, I think you've just lost a meal ticket, that's all. And kind of has an exchange with her where he's basically, aren't you going to have any kind words before I ride off? And she kind of like strikes him a couple of times, and he's like, well, I guess not. And he just rides away. So yeah, more Doc Holliday, better. Okay. But without either of those scenes, I don't think it affects the movie. Watching this DVD tonight on my rather large screen, I was thinking to myself, I need a better transfer of this. The DVD is, even though it's one of the THX remasters, it was top of the line at the time, there were several scenes that I was like, yeah, this transfer isn't that good. So if you're saying that the Blu-ray of the theatrical version looks rather nice, then it might be upgrading to that.
Yeah. It's a little tough because the last time I watched it, I think I got a newer TV earlier this year too. So I upgraded both the TV and to a 4K Blu-ray player. So I think obviously anything is probably going to look better on that TV than it did on the old one. I feel like I notice a little bit of a difference, but I don't know if it's substantially different than the DVD was. But, nicer TV, nicer Blu-ray player, and I wish they would do a 4K of this one. I'd be curious to see if they did a really good transfer on a 4K version. And I feel like I did look it up at one point, and that there is, I want to say there's a Finnish version of this. Somebody made it in Finland, and it's a 4K transfer of it, but that's supposed to be halfway decent. But otherwise, I think it's just the Blu-ray and the DVDs are your best option. That's one of the things I'm noticing too, and slight tangent from everything else, is there are not a lot of Westerns that are on 4K. Like, they don't tend to do a lot of Westerns on higher definition, and I don't know if that's but between that, a couple of things I've been searching for have been Westerns and Robin Williams movies. And I'm noticing that Robin Williams, on especially certain movies, has not even gotten a Blu-ray release, much less 4K or anything like that. I think Jumanji and Hook may be his only ones that he's gotten a 4K release on. But I would be really curious. I mean, there's quite a few scenes in this one where I would really love to see what an ultra high definition on a really nice TV would look like if they had, some kind of a 4K transfer of it. I'd be really curious. Not out yet, but as soon as it comes out. All right, so that was a slight tangent after we were, 3 things in on our trivia. that's probably how things are going to go tonight, but we'll try our best to stay focused a little bit here. Director, well, I'm going to put director in quotation marks because there's some stories about this. Director was George P. Cosmatos, who did Rambo: First Blood Part 2 and Cobra. Writer was Kevin Jarre, who did Glory and The Devil's Own. And I'll stop there for just a moment because Kevin Jarre was originally supposed to be the director of this. I believe it was going to be his directorial debut. And he was coming in over budget and over time, and the studio was over with him. So they fired him and brought in George P. Cosmatos. But the story that goes around with this too is that George P. Cosmatos was brought in as kind of a ghost director, but instead it was actually Kurt Russell that was doing a lot of the directing of this movie. And I think to a point, Val Kilmer has confirmed some of that, but then some of the actors have said, no, I was directed by George Cosmatos. I wasn't directed by Kurt Russell. So probably kind of depending on who you ask, who the director of this movie was. So on paper, on the credits, it's George P. Cosmatos. It seems likely that Kurt Russell did quite a bit of it, if not most of it. And it sounds like he had a hand in trimming down some of Kevin Jarre's pretty massive screenplay. It sounded like this movie was supposed to be quite a bit longer, and there were some other subplots, and that Kurt Russell trimmed it down and actually made some changes so that it really emphasized that relationship between Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp more than the original screenplay actually did. So, producers on this one were James Jacks, Sean Daniel, and Bob Misiorowski. Jacks did The Mummy, Dazed and Confused. Sean Daniel did The Mummy and The Wolfman. Bob Misiorowski did Detox and Shark Attack 3. Producer was Bruce Boughton, who did Silverado and Young Sherlock Holmes. Cinematographer William A. Fraker, who did War Games and Rosemary's Baby. Editors were Harvey Rosenstock, Roberto Silvi, and Frank Uriosti. Rosenstock did Resident Evil Extinction and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Silvi did The Amityville Horror and Get Carter, and Uriosti did RoboCop and Total Recall. Production companies were Synergy Pictures and Hollywood Pictures. Budget was approximately $25 million. Box office was approximately $73.2 million. Flickmetrics gives it I believe a 62. That seems wrong. I feel like it should be higher than that.
Yeah.
Let me go look at that because I feel like that might be an old number from a movie that I just accidentally didn't replace. I'm going to say Flickmetrics gives it a 102%, and Cinema Score gives it an A+++++ with extra credit. We're just going to go with that. We're educators, so I feel like we can make stuff up if we want to.
I don't see why not. I think this movie won the best Oscar for the greatest, coolest film ever.
The best
that I
Oscar
can think of right now.
Best Oscar for best Oscars.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah,
it incepted the Oscars.
I think that you can look that up. I read something. Abraham Lincoln was quoted on the internet as saying that.
Yes,
I'm not sure, but
and the top is still spinning.
Yes.
Kurt Russell played Wyatt Earp. He was in The Thing and Escape from New York. Val Kilmer was Doc Holliday. He was in Heat and The Doors. Sam Elliott played Virgil Earp. He was in The Big Lebowski and Roadhouse. Bill Paxton, who passed away in 2017, played Morgan Earp. He was in Aliens and Twister. Powers Booth, who also passed away in 2017, I believe, played Curly Bill Brocious. He was in Sin City and The Avengers. Michael Biehn played Johnny Ringo. He was in The Terminator and Aliens. Charlton Heston, who I believe passed away in 2008, played Henry Hooker. He was in Ben-Hur and Planet of the Apes. Jason Priestley played Billy Breckenridge. He was in Beverly Hills 90210 and Private Eyes. John Tenney played Behan. He was in The Closer in Green Lantern. Stephen Lang played Ike Clanton, who is not as dumb as he looks. He was in Avatar and Don't Breathe. Thomas Hayden Church played Billy Clanton. He was in Sideways and Spider-Man 3. Dana Delaney played Josephine Marcus. She was in China Beach and Body of Proof. Paula Malcolmson played Allie Earp. She was in Deadwood and Ray Donovan. Lisa Collins played Louisa Earp. She was in Zero Dark 30 and The Prophecy 2. And Frank Stallone played Ed Bailey. He was in Staying Alive and Rocky. All right. I got a little bit of trivia here. And if you guys have any other trivia that you know of off the top of your head, feel free to jump in and offer some of those. But I've got a couple of things here. In terms of historicity, I think I said that right. Wyatt Earp, years after Doc Holliday's death, Wyatt Earp was said to have described him in an interview as a very complex person, that he was a dentist turned gambler, a gentleman turned vagabond, a witty philosopher, despite being seriously ill, and he was remarkably skilled with a gun. So it really seems like a lot of the different things that I've read that not necessarily exactly the same as how Val Kilmer portrayed him, but it seems like just some of the things that Doc Holliday, the real Doc Holliday, said and did. Maybe this movie isn't too far off from who the actual historical figure was. One of the things I saw here that when Kevin Jarre was the director of this, he insisted that the actors wear real wool costumes that were true to the period. And Val Kilmer was recounting a memory of, I think it was one of the scenes where they were in the theater. And he said that that there was a thermometer on set to kind of monitor the heat, and that it was 134 degrees Fahrenheit on set. And he suggested that maybe that's why Doc Holliday was so upset with people, is he was just wearing really hot and scratchy clothes all the time, and that's why he killed people. Let's see, Robert Mitchum, who I tried to do a little bit of a play on in my intro to this episode. He was the narrator for this. He was initially cast as Old Man Clanton, who I believe the character was cut from the movie, so we don't see that character at all in the movie. He actually had to withdraw because he injured his back riding a horse, and so he couldn't take the part, but he ended up taking the part of the narrator. So, and he's another one that several people in or involved with this movie had been in a bunch of other kind of classic Westerns. He was in El Dorado and I think maybe a few others. But yeah, and it was kind of fun to see. I mean, that's one thing too. You get some of these, we've talked about movies and TV shows before where they just almost bring like a parade of famous figures in that genre. So I've talked before about how my wife and I love the TV show Mad About You. We always loved how they would bring almost just like a parade of classic comedians through that show. You'd see Mel Brooks, you'd see Sid Caesar, you'd see Carl Reiner. I mean, just constantly bringing them through as guest stars. And I feel like there's movies like this, like when a modern Western is done right, I use parade, but I don't want to use that in a derogatory way, but they basically parade through a bunch of people who are integral to the entire Western genre. And that's one of the things I enjoy about this movie is knowing that there are several people involved in this movie that either were directly involved or indirectly related to others who had been really a huge part of the Western genre as it progressed over the course of film and TV history. In fact, Wyatt Earp himself, he died in 1929, but for his last several years, he was a consultant on a bunch of old Westerns in Hollywood, some of the silent films. He was frequently seen on sets of films directed by John Ford. You know, he was connected to a bunch of other movies, and apparently John Wayne had claimed to have met him and based some of his mannerisms on Wyatt Earp himself. Here was a really fun one that I found, though. Do you guys know the Batman connection to this movie, other than the Val Kilmer Batman connection? Yeah, Rob, you're nodding your head. What's the other Batman connection?
Cesar Romero played a villain or a cowboy in a very, very early Western or something along those lines.
Oh, that one I didn't even know. That was not the one I had in my notes. That's cool.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, Cesar Romero, who obviously played the Joker in the 60s Batman, had played a cowboy in early Westerns before he became known for the rest of his career.
Yeah. I feel like you get that a lot especially with like Star Trek and some of the other shows in the 60s. And you had a lot of these people were coming from the Westerns in the 1950s and 1960s. So the one I'm thinking of ties to the 1966 Batman show. And it is, so Val Kilmer played Doc Holliday. Val Kilmer, in my mind, is the Doc Holliday. Like, I don't picture Doc Holliday without it being Val Kilmer. However, and it was his performance as Doc Holliday that inspired Joel Schumacher to cast him as Batman. But there's another Batman who played Doc Holliday as well. Adam West was actually known for playing Doc Holliday. There were 3 different TV series in 1959. One was called Lawman. I think he did it for 1 episode on Lawman. One was called Sugarfoot. He did it for 2 or 3 episodes on that one. And another one was Colt 45, and he for 2 or 3 episodes on that one. All 3 of those TV shows, all 3 of them in 1959, he played the character of Doc Holliday in those shows. So you have 2 Batmen have also played 2 different Doc Hollidays.
That's cool. And a reflection on what you're saying about how Wyatt Earp was on the set of early Hollywood movies and all that kind of thing. I just think that's so cool when you see these worlds connect. The fact that this thing that we are like, this mythic lore that we consume and love overlaps with Hollywood movies, this media that we love to talk about. But then on the flip side, movies have been going that long that they actually overlapped with the Old West. I just find it when you look at time in that with those, those indicators, the fact that Wyatt Earp crossed over and between those generations, I just find that fascinating. I just like looking at things with that. So that was very cool.
With that in mind, there is plenty of conjecture out there that Wyatt Earp, through meeting Hollywood types, kind of inflated and created his own legend. There's a lot of conjecture about that and speculation as to how much of his story was real and how much was built up by him in his own mind.
Yeah, I was reading something earlier that the name Virgil Earp probably would have been a little bit more well known. Like they would have maybe known the Deputy Marshal Virgil Earp a little bit better than you would have known Wyatt Earp. And you would have heard of Wyatt Earp because of his time in Dodge City and all that. I had been doing a little bit of reading on some of the history of this, and a couple things that I found kind of interesting were, Doc Holliday was a dentist. Like that's his profession. That was his trade. And obviously with the tuberculosis, you can't be hacking up a lung while you're looking down somebody's throat. That doesn't work very well. So he had to give that up, and that's when he went into the gambling and his life of crime and whatever else you want to call it. One of the other things I read was at the time that he arrived in Tombstone, round about this time, he came into town with approximately $40,000, which if you recalculate that for today's value, it would have been about $1 million. So whatever he was doing before he came to Tombstone, he was wildly successful because he walked into town a millionaire. So interesting that you pointed out, Rob, about the extra scene with him and Kate, because historically it sounded like their relationship was a little bit more oil and water, that they were a little bit more fiery than maybe what it is portrayed in the movie, that they did a lot more arguing with each other and they were very hot and cold with each other. And so it kind of sounded like it was maybe a little bit more, because in the movie it does seem like you do get the sense that she's really just there, as you put it, or as he put it, that it's really just a meal ticket for her in some ways. And that's kind of how she responds to him even trying to tell her, look, we might have to I forget how he says it, we might have to re-examine the nature of our relationship or whatever it is he says. And so I guess in real life it was a little bit more of they were a little bit on each other's nerves, maybe more so than you see in the movie.
A relationship of convenience.
Yes, but you may just be the Antichrist. There were 5 Earp brothers, and that originally in an early version of the screenplay, they were looking at possibly having all 5 of the Earp brothers be portrayed in this movie. But when things were coming in over budget and over time and everything else, and Jar's screenplay was a beast, apparently, and they needed to really cut some things down, that was one of the things that immediately got cut in one of the very early drafts was, okay, we're going to cut this down to 3 because we can't have, this cast is getting to be huge and we just can't do that. It's going to be too expensive. And so apparently at least a couple of the Earp brothers, one, I believe, was running one of the saloons in town when they all got there, took over running one of the saloons. One was a deputy marshal with Virgil. Virgil actually had it. It wasn't because of guilt or anything else or a sense of duty that he eventually, took on a deputy role, that he actually had that set up before they even got to Tombstone. Like as Virgil came to town, he already had that job as Fred White's deputy marshal. So that a little bit different than the historical account. Wyatt Earp, apparently his plan was to come in and to start a stagecoach company in Tombstone, but there was too much competition. So he had some experience in the past, and apparently that's how he met Maddie. She was a madam at a house of ill repute, and he was kind of the equivalent of like a bouncer and offered protection, and that was how he ended up meeting her and how they ended up together. And so apparently as he came to Tombstone, his his attempt at starting his business was not working out, and so he did get connected with some of the saloons there, offering his protection as, for lack of a better word, a bouncer. And that's where you get some of the stories with him pulling the guy out by his ear, kicking him out of the bar. Although apparently that story too didn't happen until about 7 years after the events of this movie in reality. So mixing up timelines there just a little bit. But so apparently his stepping back into law enforcement also was not because of his brothers, not necessarily because of any kind of feelings of guilt or anything like that. He was low on money. Like, he just needed a paycheck, and he's like, well, I know I'm good at this, so let me step back into this again, and you can deputize me, and I'll take a job on as another deputy marshal, and I'll do this. But it was more of a financial need rather than well, I got to stick with my brothers and back their play, and I feel a little guilty for this, and okay, I guess I'll do it. Wasn't necessarily that. It was pocketbook is feeling a little light here. Let's get a paycheck, because I do enjoy getting paid. So there's a whole bunch of other historical stuff that I was reading up on and finding that is just a lot of fun. And you can tell that the makers of this movie, whoever the director was, and the writers and everybody else, that they really did care about the content. They did care about the stories. They cared about the legends. They cared about getting as much historically accurate as they could, because there are a lot of different things. Even just little stuff that's in the background in this movie is fairly close. I'll say fairly close to being pretty historically accurate. And to be able to take a movie like this and have it be as entertaining as it is, as funny as it is, but also pretty close to being historically accurate. Really, when you compare it with some other stuff, Pat, I won't even mention the name of one of your favorite movies, but yeah. So I think for me, that's one of the reasons why this movie just knocks it out of the park, is because it is able to balance all of those things. When it needs to take a little bit of liberties, it's not so much that I think a historian would be completely turned off by it.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to everyone to decide for themselves, but it does seem that there's different ways.
I'm deciding for them.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. It's up to John to decide for them. But it is interesting with these movies, and it all kind of balances what entertains us. Yeah. But it's funny because, like, historical accuracy, you're right. It's like, okay, you can watch a film that, that's pretty much exactly how those events happen, in what order, and you're really seeing that pretty accurately depicted. Or, there's some movies that we watch that, okay, it really didn't happen in this way, but these things that you're seeing, or John, the way you described it, things in the background, are kind of accurately depicting the way things looked in the Old West, right? And there's other movies like that. We've talked about the movie Gladiator, right? Gladiator took little semblances of legend and different pieces of Roman history, but then they kind of put it together. And so what you're looking at is, that's the way like a Roman army battalion would form the phalanx, or, well, that was the Greek thing, the phalanx, but whatever their version of it was. But okay, we're telling a fictional story within that. Okay, we're telling a story about the Earps, and we definitely take liberties to make them seem more heroic, or the quote unquote good guys, or the reason he went back into being a lawman. But the way the town is set up, the way the action is happening, the way that seems pretty period authentic, right? And it's an interesting balance when we're trying to do something for entertainment. And I think a big component is, what do we look at the source material, right? Like, we're far enough away from the Old West, you can kind of overlay that with like that's kind of like our American mythology. So we don't necessarily need to be like locked in with, okay, how should this be portrayed? For me personally, the movie that you talked about that I kind of struggle with, Pearl Harbor, I don't know if we want to look on that like the way we would look on that with mythology, where it's just like, okay, well, we're going to make it seem like a lot of action and crazy and cool. And okay, well, maybe with this topic matter, I think we should be a little bit more respectful. And that's just my opinion. But it's always interesting seeing what part of historical accuracy, how much do we want that / how much do we want entertainment / you know what I'm saying? It's always an interesting balance with those things.
Yeah. I forgot to tell you, before we started recording, before you came on, Rob told me that Pearl Harbor is actually one of his favorite movies.
I never said that. I would never say that.
Never. See, See,
I write for the Navy. I would never say that.
I was going to say, John, I know you're trying to spin me up, but be careful what you accuse Rob of, because he might like, I could just see the cup that he's drinking from just get like crushed, right? Yeah. You know, just like, you know. Uh-huh. You know, Rob is suddenly looking over the shoulder at his colleagues going, no, I never said that. I never said that, guys. Yeah. John's just trying to spin Pat up with this one.
It's lies. It's all lies. I don't even know who this guy is. All right. Well, let me give you the synopsis real quick. And right after that, I'm going to play the trailer audio. And have either of you guys listened to the trailer, the theatrical trailer for this one?
I don't think so. But
not in years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and make this comment now. And Pat, we've talked about this with several other movies. Worst placement of trailer music. Worst matchup with trailer music and the content of the trailer ever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to make that comment now.
Wow.
Like it does not fit at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I want to hear this now.
So I'm going to give you the synopsis, but I'm going to leave you with one word. And this one word will probably cause you to scratch your head. Thankfully, nobody can see us. None of us have too much hair to lose if we start scratching our heads too hard. I'm going to leave you with one word. Enigma. In a world where Tom Mix wept, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Virgil Earp, Morgan Earp, and Curly Bill Brocious ride through the lawless lands of Tombstone. As the Earp brothers seek peace, fate deals a hand of vengeance. In the shadow of the OK Corral, things are not okay, and legends clash in a showdown that will echo throughout history. Tombstone, where legends never die and myths are born at the speed of a bullet.
It was a place where a man could start over, where a fortune could be made. They say every town has a story. Tombstone has a legend.
Who is he?
That's Wyatt Earp. Made a name for himself as a peace officer. I heard of you. I'm retired.
You must be Doc Holliday. You retired too?
Not me. I'm in my prime.
Hollywood Pictures presents.
The only real law around here is the cowboys.
The story of Wyatt Earp.
The first time in our lives we got a chance to stop wandering and finally be a family. Now this is trouble we don't need.
If we're gonna have a future in this town, it's gotta have some law and order. What do you want, Ringo?
I want your blood. I want your soul. I want them both right now.
They shot your brother.
Now the time has come for justice.
Guess maybe you better swear me in.
And he has to live up to his reputation.
You got a fight coming.
I'll be there!
One last time.
None of your problem, Doc. You don't have to mix up in this.
That is a hell of a thing for you to say to me.
In a battle.
The last charge of Wyatt Earp and his immortals.
At the OK Corral.
Oh, my God.
The West would never forget. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Dana Delaney, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Bill Paxton, Jason Priestley, Sam Elliott, and Charlton Heston.
You tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me!
Justice is coming to Tombstone.
So, what do we think of the trailer music? I started listening the first time I was watching it. I'm going, okay, hold on. Enya? No, not Enya. Enigma? Yep, it's Enigma. And then I went and looked at it. Yeah, it is. It's apparently part of the song Sadness by the German pop band Enigma. Like, I'm not sure that pop Gregorian chant goes
and pan flutes.
Yeah, you're right. It's the pan flute of Old West vengeance.
Well, When I think of this movie, and we'll get into this more, but when I think of this movie, I think to me, it really pays homage to the classical Westerns. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like the idea of an ensemble cast makes me think back of what they did with the Magnificent Seven.
Oh yeah.
The big sweeping story makes me think back to those earlier Westerns, the good guys, the bad guys. And it's definitely like there's some grit to it, but it's not like Unforgiven. It's supposed to turn the Western world on its ear. It's not going. It very much to me seems like an homage to the classic Western, right? And the soundtrack really sells that for me. When I listen to the soundtrack, it just has that sweeping feel of that old Hollywood Western to me, right? That music doesn't make it sound like it. It sounds like they're trying to go into another direction. And it's funny because the two movies that came to mind, and I know it's like completely different, but it was almost like what they tried to do with Young Guns, right? With Young Guns, it's like, hey, it's a Western, but it's a rock and roll Western. Okay. And this movie, it's kind of like just listening to the voiceover. Okay, it's a Western, but this is a new Western. And if I hadn't known it was a Western, just listening to the audio, it could almost have been set in like 1990s, 1980 LA, right? Before, with no images attached to it.
Yeah.
And what did we do a movie with Val Kilmer where he was going out on a Native American reservation and trying to solve a crime?
Uh-huh.
Thunderheart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thunderheart. I almost got vibes of like, and I don't remember, but I almost got vibes of like that movie just in kind of hearing some of the voiceovers. So it's just, to me, it just reinforces something that we always talk about and how much a part of the storytelling the music is. But yeah, it really was a clash, right? I think we're all kind of nodding our heads like, yeah, that just didn't gel.
And to me, one of the weaknesses of this movie is actually, for me, the soundtrack.
Really?
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the soundtrack. I don't. Okay. But that might be my blind spot. I don't think I've watched a lot of older Westerns. The Western that I go farthest back with are the Clint Eastwood, The Man with No Name trilogy. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is my favorite Western of all time.
Okay, yeah.
And that's mainly my father's influence. I have not seen a lot of. I've never seen The Searchers, which is hailed as one of the greatest of all time, and probably the greatest John Wayne movie of all time. So, if I'll take your word, Pat, that it was evoking some of the sounds, the soundtracks, the musical scores of old Westerns. For me, it kind of clashed because, as you were saying, this is a 90s Western. There is a lot about this movie that is very 90s. Mm-hmm. And I think the music kind of slaps me when I'm watching it a little bit, that I'm like, yep, this was a Western made in the 90s, because it just doesn't quite fit for me.
Okay.
It just doesn't.
Well, I don't think there's any right answers and all that kind of stuff. So I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are with, okay, well, this is where it's a 90s movie. You know what I'm saying? I can't wait to hear your perspective on all that.
But the trailer music, I think we can all agree, the trailer music is bad.
Oh, it's terrible.
Really bad choice.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. So I found, just real quick, as you guys were talking, I found something real fast. Back in 2006, they did a 2-disc kind of special release of the Tombstone soundtrack by Entrada Records. And Bruce Broughton, I don't know how you say it, was asked about his approach to the score. And this is a direct quote from the composer. He said, "The music to Tombstone is not particularly Western, in that the orchestration depends not at all on the typical Western instruments such as guitar and harmonica. It relies, in fact, on instruments of ethnic color like the Hungarian cymbalom, the Irish tin whistle, and the bodhrán, the French contrabass sarrusophone. The brass section includes, along with tenor and bass, the more massive contrabass trombone." Am I saying, I'm probably butchering some of the names of these. I should have had you read this, Pat.
I don't know about that. I think you're doing great, man.
Is it contrabass or contrabass?
I think it's contrabass.
Okay, contrabass. I said that one wrong.
I'm trying not to explain, you know.
Contrabass is a fish playing an old 80s Nintendo game, is what that is.
Right, but I do believe the contrabass was consumed. That was a large part of the Western diet. So I think you're right in line with...
That's fine, too. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right in line with fact.
Yeah.
Maybe...
Potato, doesn't really matter. Much of this score reminds me of what I once heard Bernard Herrmann tell a studio orchestra. The highest note here is the middle C. And so it looks like this. I would be curious in trying to track down this release if I can find it somewhere. But yeah, so apparently his approach to it, even though I do agree with you, I haven't watched a ton of the old Westerns, but I do feel like I've seen enough of them to think of this soundtrack as an homage to that. So maybe it doesn't use the same traditional instruments and whatnot, but I don't know that I agree with the composer. So I'll say the composer's wrong about his own composition.
Well, I mean, you know,
in that I do think it does sound, to me, it sounds very Western. I mean, maybe not necessarily always American Western, but to me, there are definitely parts of it that sound very Western. But yeah.
Well, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer when you're getting to like what a composer writes. He or she can be thinking one way, but then that's up to the audience to go, wow, that totally made me think to go in this direction. I mean, you even see that with composers when they write music, and then suddenly the director and not so much in movies, but like if a director and an ensemble interprets it, it's like, well, that wasn't the direction I was going. So I think that I don't think there's any right or wrong or when it comes to the feels that you get. I just that main theme, that bum 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 bum, and I'm singing it kind of off key, but you hear that theme come back throughout, and sometimes it's just used as, you know, when they're thundering across the plains on horseback, and it's just this commanding, like just this booming brass heavy. Yeah. But then all of a sudden you'll hear it. I think, like you mentioned, some of the lighter instruments or some of the more ethnic instruments, as the composer put it, it'll use that same theme. And again, it's back to that idea of you're using this one main theme, and then how you rework that theme is informing what you're supposed to feel about the theme. But that's pretty cool that we're talking about the music and we've each drawn a different emotional reaction to it. Yeah. I mean, that definitely shows that the music has a punch, which I think is the cool takeaway.
Yeah. All right, so our major moments, we've kind of broken the plot down into 10 major moments of this one, and if you guys want to comment on these as we go along, feel free. I'm sure we're going to interrupt here and bring in some of our opinions, even though we'll try to hold some of that to the Deep Thoughts segment, but major moments. 10 major moments of the movie. Number 1, massacre at the Mexican wedding. The cowboys, led by Curly Bill Brocious, disrupt a wedding in Mexico, massacring the local policemen as revenge for the killing of their gang members. A priest prophesies their doom. So, right off the bat, this first scene of the movie, it establishes just how rough the cowboy gang is. And I think gives you a pretty good sense of what our characters are going to be up against, because I would imagine in most traditional Westerns, you're not going to shoot a priest in the head. Like, that's kind of one of the things you don't do, is you don't mess with the clergy in the old Westerns. They're pretty much off limits most times. But yeah, so you kind of get that, and you get the initial kind of imagery of the idea of the horsemen of the apocalypse, and the idea that, well, there's this pale rider, and the horse, he's riding a pale horse, and the rider on him is called Death, and hell follows with him, and all of this. And then obviously that comes back later in the movie when Wyatt is telling them that he's coming and hell's coming with him. So tying those pieces together. But yeah, I really enjoy, as a first scene in the movie, I'm like, this is where I feel like we just slam down the gas pedal and we're just going to start going from here. And Pat, you had mentioned, you were like, I feel like I'm going to interrupt as soon as we get to the first scene of the movie. So did you have anything else you wanted to add to this part?
I'm sorry. I have seen 0.5. Okay, not scene 1.
Tell me 0.5.
Rob, were you going to say something?
I was going to say,
I just don't want to cut it.
Yeah, the first scene we're given Chekhov's bringer of comeuppance.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, I'm just going to throw in quick 0.5. The opening of this movie. Okay, so a voiceover with Robert Mitchum. Yes. So already you have the goosebumps, right? Because what a fantastic role that the narrator is. Second of all, they starts narrating, and you know, when I first watched this movie, and I'm just like, okay, you're watching that old film where it looks a little herky-jerky, right? And you guys, if Dennis was here, they could talk all about like the technical camera angles and everything. But I mean, it makes it look like old film, okay? And the first time you see it, you're like, okay, am I watching a documentary? Am I watching old film? And then it's like, okay, the 100th time you see it, you realize that some of those black and white scenes are actually scenes from later in the movie. That when the actor and actress first show up and Wyatt and Doc are standing on the street from a distance, like that's one of the scenes you get. Mm-hmm. And so then you realize, oh man, I'm seeing modern film, modern things going on, but set in that like camera that make old, right? So then your brain's just like, how much have I seen of old, and I judge it based on the technology and what it looks like. In reality, there's real people living real lives, but it just looks old. And what I love is that as they're doing the narration, you realize, okay, this isn't a documentary, but it kind of has that feel to it. And you got Robert Mitchum and all that. And the way that just builds to the point when it's got, and they call them the Cowboys. And then all of a sudden there's got that old picture, and then all of a sudden it moves and he pulls the gun and just kablam. And then you are just catapulted into this scene of the horses. They're all riding, and I think it's the Cowboys riding to that town. And that's when the soundtrack hits, and it's just percussion and dissonance and boom, 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 boom. And it's just this thundering, and you are catapulted into it. And when you go back and watch it open, and I did, because now I know it, I have to watch that like 3 or 4 times because it's just so cool. It starts old school kind of film. I think you even have a little piano playing, sort of like you're watching the silent movie. And then it kind of builds in the narration. And then all of a sudden, bam, boom, 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 boom. And we're into the movie. And that is like one of the greatest openings of movies of all time. I mean, I just love the way this movie opens up. So that was the one. I'm sorry. I know you had scene 1, but if I could add scene 0.5, the intro to this movie is just fantastic.
Greatest James Bond prequel of all time. You know, where they point the gun and they fire at you, and then the movie starts. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I was waiting for somebody to start singing "Nobody Does It Better," but. So Wyatt Earp arrives in Tombstone. Earp, along with his brothers Virgil and Morgan, arrive in Tombstone, Arizona to settle down. They bring along their wives with them, and they reunite with Wyatt's friend Doc Holliday. And at the beginning here, they also encounter a traveling theater troupe, including Josephine Marcus. But we have some fun little scenes here. It's going to be tough to cover all of them in our quick major moments segment, but I will say the first few times we get introduced to Doc Holliday, you know, there are so many. I think, as I've said before, my wife and I are constantly quoting this movie, particularly because our children are both of the teenage persuasion at this point. And there are times where I will say something, or even after they've left the room, my wife will just turn to each other and just go, and pretend like we're talking to one of the kids. Why Ed? Why Ed Bailey? Are we cross? Well, Ed, if I didn't think you were my friend, I just don't think I could bear it. There. Now we can be friends again. Like,
and
that's such a great introduction.
Until this watching, I had no idea that was Frank Stallone.
That was me too. That was the one that I was like, this time watching it this week, I was like, wait. And I saw his name in the credits. I was like, wait, what? What?
Yeah. Because as I was watching it, I pulled up the IMDb, and I was flipping through my phone to write down all the names of the actors. I was like, oh yeah, this person is it, and I was like, where the heck is Frank Stallone? And as I'm writing down Frank Stallone, that scene comes up in the movie where we're introduced to Doc Holliday. I'm like, I had no clue that was him.
Yeah. This was like the week of Frank Stallone in our family, because we watched this, and then just a few days ago we watched Be Kind, Rewind, which he's also, I believe he's also in, maybe just as like a quick cameo or something. But I'm like, okay, so the running theme for Thanksgiving is Frank Stallone. I don't know how many houses in America that's happening, but God, I love these opening scenes. I mean, just from the get-go, Doc Holliday is the absolute focus of this movie in my mind. Like, I know Wyatt Earp is the main character, but
absolutely, the movie does such a great job of setting up everybody, but when you introduce the co-star in that scene, everybody's like, okay, yeah, I know Kurt Russell's in this. Oh yeah, and they've got that gorgeous, Sam Elliott. But holy crap, there's this Val Kilmer guy that we haven't really seen in too many big things up until this point. Of course, everybody remembers from Top Gun and My Science Project.
Yep.
And one of my personal favorites, Top Secret. He's phenomenal in Top Secret.
Yep.
But he wasn't super huge.
Right.
And then he shows up in this movie, and that 5-minute scene where guy's accusing him of cheating, and you're introduced, and he just has all these great lines, and immediately his charisma just starts oozing through, and you're drawn in. And immediately, and that was the thing that stuck with me the first time I watched this movie. I was like, holy wow, Val Kilmer's really good.
Yeah. Before we started watching this with the kids, my wife and I were playing it up as this movie may have one of the greatest movie characters of all time in it. And the kids were like, what do you mean? We're like, we're going to show you this movie, and your mom and I truly believe that this is one of the greatest movie characters to exist in all of Hollywood history. It is at least one of our absolute favorites. From every line that he delivers to every little mannerism, he's like a walking Easter egg, even when he's in the background. Like, you almost want to just watch the scene over again just to see what was Val Kilmer doing over there. Like, I know he's not the focus of this scene. I just want to see what he's doing over there. Like, every little thing that he does, from when they start grabbing the money and putting it in the bag, he even takes his last little shot of a drink and then throws the cup in the bag, and just a bunch of little stuff like that. Just absolutely love his performance in this movie. I mean, he is the reason. I love the rest of this movie, but he is the reason that I will come back and continue to rewatch this movie over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it's funny because cycling back to our historical accuracies discussion, I feel like the liberties that they take with these characters, they gain so much more in compelling and exciting and fun to watch characters that, to me, it's worth it. And I mean, obviously Val Kilmer, but also the Earps, all of them, the bit characters, the side characters, the good characters, all of them. It's just a real theme in this movie that, okay, they took liberties, but the fictional characters that they build off of the historical characters are just fun to watch. They are so entertaining, and it's so worth it. It's really upside in these characters that they create.
Yeah. I gotta say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I come to a movie like this, I know it's based on historic events. I don't care how accurate it is. This is an incredibly entertaining movie. And you were going through, I mentioned Wyatt Earp kind of built up his own legend by the people that he met later on in life. You know what? I still don't care. Unless he did something horrible and was denying it for the rest of his life and got away with it on his deathbed and never got his comeuppance, I don't care. This is a very good movie with famous characters that are part of our culture, part of the early beginnings of this nation. And it's entertaining. And sure, did Doc Holliday say every single thing that Val Kilmer says in this movie? Probably not. But does it matter? No, not a bit. Not to me. So I expect when I go to see a movie, Hollywood is going, the writers, the director, the actors, everybody has taken their own liberties with presenting a story. I am here to see a story. I'm here to be entertained. If I want the truth, I will read some books or go watch a couple of documentaries. So I just want to get that completely out of the way because I don't want my enjoyment of this film to be tainted by, well, you know what, this didn't really happen this way, or this didn't really happen this way. Because to me, the things that it does get right, and we'll get to some of those, are more interesting and important than, is this character exactly how they were on screen? Is this exactly how they were portrayed? It doesn't really matter. They're charismatic. These are great actors at the height of their powers, entertain me, tell a good story. That's all that really matters as far as this is concerned.
Yeah. Well, and the fun part of that
Well
for
said,
me,
sir.
yeah. And the fun
Well
part of
said.
that for me is to learn that, and I'm the same way. If it's an entertaining movie, I don't care. Like I can give the historical accuracy a pass. Like I'm not a history PhD. I'm not some diehard. It's got to be absolutely perfect. What makes it even more fun for me is to ultimately find out the times where, yes, actual Doc Holliday really did say that. The line of "You Daisy if you do," or "I'm your Huckleberry," or stuff like that. Like to find out that, yeah, he actually did say those lines and that they used that in the movie. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I don't know if the actual guy, if his delivery is going to be as good as Val Kilmer, but you know, just the fact that that is something that he said. And it would be just to hear somebody say that at the end of a gunfight, "You Daisy if you do," like, that's awesome. That's absolutely
That's
awesome.
pretty cool. Well, and they're just fun characters. And, you know, when the two guys that are like the side characters, Creek Johnson and whatever, and then they started naming off their full names. It's like, oh, it's Creek Johnson. And it's like, allow me to introduce Turkey Creek Jack Johnson. And it's like, wait, what? Creek is actually Turkey Cripple Creek Jack. He's got like 8 names. I'm like, that is so cool. And then even the other guy was like, I don't know, Tennessee Slim or something like that. And all I could think of was Teen Wolf. When he's like, his 3 rules is never play cards with a guy who is named after a U.S. city or something, or a landmark or something. All I could think of is here's these 2 guys that are just like, it is just so fun. I mean, like the names, that is just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
The appearance of like the actor Billy Zane appears, and like you said that you introduced, and he jumps out, like the way he jumps off, and he puts his hand out to help it, and then she hands him the bag, and like the bit of acting that he does, he's just like, okay, and now she's coming out, and it's just okay. Billy Zane has like a co-starring role, a little bit of a smaller part, but he absolutely maximizes his time on screen. You can't not watch him, and when you have everybody in the film is swinging for the fences, like it's like this is going to be pretty cool, right? I mean, it's just like everybody is given 100%.
I was to exactly that point. One of the comments I was going to make about this movie is, I'm not sure anybody told any of the actors they weren't the main character. Like, I feel like to your point, Pat, I think every single one of them, somebody must have just lied to them and be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but Marshall Fred White, main character of this story. Yeah. Maddie Blaylock, main character of this story. Like, there is not a wasted performance in any of these performances. Not that I can tell, you know, from the person who's on screen for 5 seconds to Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, everybody.
Bill Paxton, the way he plays the younger brother that's trying to be like as cool as the big brothers. Yeah. And right when they first meet whoever, and then there's old Wyatt going to do whatever, and they're like, and they're all kind of laughing, and there's Wyatt, and they all kind of the chew and walk off. For all of you listening along, the was the spitting of the chew. I'm sorry. But the way that Bill Paxton does it just like a second later, and then looks and has to catch up with the group. That little bit tells you everything you need to know about how he's looking up to his older brothers. And that whole relationship is going to come back in a very dramatic turn later in the film, but it's such a minor couple seconds. But that one, and it's right early in the film, just the way he kind of watches, and he moves a fraction of a second after everyone else with the way he spits, and then, I better follow up my big brothers. It tells you everything you need to know. It's just great what these characters, the storytelling that's happening with this acting is just awesome.
Yeah, we get the fun scenes. So Wyatt is now a stakeholder in a gambling emporium there, and we have a series of different scenes that kind of raise the tensions with the cowboys. He is reluctant to return to any kind of law enforcement, but the more and more lawlessness that they find in the town is kind of pushing him in that direction. Some of these fun scenes, we have the scene in the theater early on, and have either of you guys ever been to actual Tombstone, Arizona? Okay. No. So I don't remember much about it, but I do remember when we when we came back after we lived in England, we came back, and I remember my dad had always wanted to take a trip to the Grand Canyon. So we took a trip to Arizona, and we popped around a couple different places, in that area of the country. And I remember we ended up going to Tombstone. And I'm trying to remember if this was, I think it would have been before I had seen the movie. This would have been probably 93 or 94. I didn't see the movie until probably about 95, maybe even 96. But we went to Tombstone, and so we got to see the OK Corral, we got to see the theater, we got to see some of the other locations that you see in the movie itself. So it was fun then watching this movie and getting to see in the movie the same places where I had been to. But it was just so much fun, like the different scenes in this, just watching when the cowboys watching this, and they're like, what is this guy? And then like kind of shooting at the stage and doing all that stuff. And then it's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, when the cowboys are moved by the Shakespeare speech. Like we do upon St. Crispin's Day. And Curly Bill's the first one. That's our kind of stuff. And they all pull out the guns, and they're like clapping, and they're firing in the air. And like, it's funny that the lawless, rough and tumble cowboy gang really loves the Shakespeare speech.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That agreed. Agreed.
And then there's the scene that follows where they're back in the bar, and it's busy, and the theater troupe is there. And that has got one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie too, is when Curly Bill and Johnny Ringo come up to the table, and there are so many lines here that lead up to the kind of showdown with Johnny Ringo twirling his gun, and then Val Kilmer, Doc Holliday twirling his mug. But leading up to that, he's like, you, Doc Holliday, you must be Doc Holliday. Are you retired too? Not me. I'm in my prime. I have said that so many times, and so many times where I am absolutely not in my prime, I will use that line, and somebody will say something like, hey, are you tired? Do you want to stop? Like, not me. I'm in my prime. But that is one that gets used constantly, along with, I stand corrected, Wyatt, you are an oak.
That's right.
Use that one pretty regularly too.
You get his classic, like, what happens if she walks in right now? And then he says, okay, and he turns and she walks in, and he's just like, oh.
I'll remember you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then how about when they're going back and forth, like speaking Latin to each other? Because that's just awesome.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that there weren't any subtitles or any of that kind of stuff. And it was just like, that was such a cool touch. And they're just kind of going back, hey boys, we don't need any drama in any language.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a very nice touch to give Johnny Ringo a little bit more to his character, other than he's a hothead. That he's, oh, this guy's educated. And they did that in the 0.5 scene, as Pat called it, where he actually translates what the priest is putting a hex on them, or saying that they're damned. And so the exchange between Doc Holliday and Johnny Ringo it gives both of their characters a little bit more heft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it really gives I'm sorry, I cut across you. Go ahead, please.
No, that's okay. And it also foreshadows that these two are going to be at loggerheads before the end of all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like they're two sides of the same coin, right? They're both like the fast gunmen in their respective groups, and they're the ones that are a little bit more of the loose cannon. They're both the educated ones. They're both but where
they both enjoy the violence.
They both enjoy the violence, but Doc almost appears as the weaker one because he's sick. Johnny Ringo appears a little bit more like, even when all the other guys are kind of going crazy or getting sloppy or whatever, he doesn't necessarily do that. But then the times that he is going crazy or he gets drunk, like when they kill some of the Clantons and all that kind of stuff, then Doc is the one that's at his, well, okay, now Doc's in a sober moment when Johnny Ringo. So it's really cool how the two of them kind of, they're opposite sides of the coin, right? When one is loose, the other one's tight. When one's tight, the other one's loose, until that very end showdown. And then they're kind of both at their high point for that one.
Yeah, and then we get kind of jumping forward a little bit. We get the scene where Curly Bill kills Marshal Fred White as he's intoxicated. He kind of, I'll put in quotation marks, accidentally kills Fred White. But leading up even to that scene, we've got another great scene with Val Kilmer at the piano, and I absolutely love this whole and what I really had a hard time with was not accidentally saying something like that out loud. My daughter, when she started to get into more complex pieces for her piano recitals, she did have a Chopin piece, and when that first came up, my wife and I looked at each other. We're like, Chopin, Frederick, Chopin, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, and it's all being played on that wonderfully delicious, perfectly out of tune piano.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it has totally got that Western bar kind of like, has this piano ever been tuned?
Yeah. And then that
sound to it.
And then that entire conversation comes back when they're outside and Wyatt has come out to grab Curly Bill after he shot Fred White. And then they have that entire conversation. And this is another one that we quote all the time. And you, music lover. And he said, as a drunk piano player, you're so drunk you're probably seeing double. I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
For each of you.
Yeah.
And that entire movie, anytime that Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday face off, you can tell Ringo is terrified of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It comes across, and Michael Biehn does such a very subtle job of expressing that without losing his tough guy exterior.
Yeah.
He walks a very fine line there.
Yeah. Then we have and I'm trying to think. This comes, I'm getting mixed up because I didn't have it exactly in my notes. One of the other ones we quote pretty regularly is when they've got their card game, and I'm trying to remember exactly what this. I think this might be after. Is this after OK Corral? Might be after the OK Corral. Probably before though. No, it's before. It's before. Where they have the scene, and Ike Clanton is like, "That's 6 hands in a row. No, nobody's that lucky." And there are times where we've used this one as well too, because sometimes we'll play card games. You know, if older family comes over and we want to have like a game night or something, and we'll play some card games. And I am absolutely terrible at every card game, but I am really good at spelling. So I will constantly bring out the line. Maybe poker just isn't your game. I know. Let's have a spelling contest.
I have used that. I used that on my brother one time. My mom laughed hysterically. My brother didn't know I was quoting the movie.
That is one that gets used regularly in our house.
I know. Let's have a spelling contest.
Let's have a spelling contest.
But here's the wonderful thing. When you were setting this up, what line? For a second, I thought you were going to, when he accuses him of cheating and he goes, "Why, Ike, whatever do you mean?" I mean, it's like, that's another great line that could be thrown in there. Mm-hmm. So, oh man.
Why, Ike, whatever do you mean? So I'm going to stop here real quick before I continue on. We're about halfway through our major moments, and we'll get through those here in just a minute. But I did want to bring this up. Do you know who was originally going to be cast to play Doc Holliday, and it was not Val Kilmer?
You know what? I've read this, but I can't remember. Who was it?
They changed their mind. They wanted to cast him, and they changed their mind based on a highly controversial movie that he was in. It was originally going to be Willem Dafoe. And they said, "Oh, no,
Really?
not after The Last Temptation of Christ."
I did read that. I completely forgot it, but no.
I don't see it.
No.
You would not have had the Doc Holliday you ended up getting. That's absolutely true. So we then end up having the gunfight at the OK Corral. Virgil becomes marshal and enforces a weapons ban, leading to the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral, which historically apparently only took about 30 seconds. Resulted in casualties, and kind of also revealed that Sheriff Behan is siding with the Cowboys in this whole thing.
And we just want to pause there real quick because, as shown in the movie, they were very close to each other. They were like, from one account that I read, they were like no less than 6 or 7 feet from each other when they were shooting at each other. So the fact that the Earp brothers only got wounded, and the other guys were wiped out is kind of amazing.
Yeah. Then we have kind of fast
Guns
forward.
Not necessarily known for their accuracy.
Yeah. No.
You know, it was, yeah.
So this is where things start to ramp up a bit, because in retaliation, the Cowboys ambush the Earp brothers, killing Morgan, crippling Virgil. And at the end of that night, Wyatt has a couple of cowboys who have come to his side. And then we have the scene the next day where he decides to leave Tombstone with his family, or so we are led to believe. That is another one where I have, and I feel like this might happen more so at work sometimes, where somebody makes a statement and they're like, well, if this happens, then I'm just going to leave. And I just sit there and be like, well, bye.
And that to me, when Kurt Russell rides up and he's got his brother's body in the coffin behind him, and they're all leaving town, and he comes up and doesn't even look at Powers Booth. He doesn't even look at Curly Bill. Yeah. So I just want to let you know that it's over. And Powers Booth, that look on his face, and how he just says, well, bye. I don't know anybody who has watched that scene knowing what had just happened, why they're allegedly leaving, and does not want to reach through the screen and then choke him. And then immediately right after that, you have Michael Biehn saying, hey, smell that? Smells like someone died. And you're like, you instantly want these guys to have the worst possible things happen to them immediately.
And
Powers Booth just delivers 2 words.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Watching it this time around was the first time I ever took Wyatt's "I just want to let you know it's over" not as a resignation, but as a threat. Like I did not, watching it all the other times, I was like, he's broken, he's resigned, but then realizing, well, no, the next scene, and they've clearly planned this out because they know somebody's coming after him, and Virgil's on the train with the women, and Wyatt, you know, he's got his posse there, and they know an ambush is coming, so they're going to ambush the ambushers. I rewatched that scene where he's like, I just want you to know it's over. And this time watching, I'm like, ooh, oh, he's telling him the Cowboys are over, not that their stint in Tombstone is over, not that his family's stint in Tombstone is over. It's no, you guys are finished.
Yeah, and that's where I think that the addition of that scene between Doc Holliday and Kate kind of ruins that surprise that they're not really leaving, because immediately after they ride out, it's Doc Holliday and Kate in a stable where he's getting suited up. He's saddling up the horse to leave, and he's saying his goodbyes to her, and she's basically telling him off.
Yeah.
So the next scene is at the train station. And of course, Doc's riding up with McMasters and the other 2 cowboys. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, maybe as much as I love more Doc Holliday,
right,
that kind of does ruin the surprise of that scene.
Yeah. So they have the Wyatt Earp vendetta ride. Wyatt becomes a U.S. Marshal and forms a posse, including Doc Holliday and then a couple of the reformed cowboys, making a couple others, to seek revenge against the Cowboys. And we have posse gets ambushed at the creek. Wyatt heroically survives and kills Curly Bill, but it's this whole scene, and I remember watching this for the first time as a teenager, being like, oh, this is so cool. The scene where he's just like, we're stuck. What are we going to do? Wyatt, what are we going to do? And he just starts in the no. No. And I love the look on Powers Booth. I love the look on his face. And he's just like, look at that. Like, he's amazed. Yeah. Like, he knows they're about to get into a gunfight and somebody's going to die here. But he's just like, look at that. I absolutely love that scene. And then I love after that scene, once everything has happened and he has killed Curly Bill and the rest of some of the cowboys have kind of run off and they're all laying around resting afterwards, and somebody's like, "Where'd Wyatt go?" And Doc Holliday's just sitting there. And he goes, "Oh, down by the creek, walking on water."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. Two quick things.
Yeah.
When they go walking up to the train, and the last thing, "Hey, Maddie, where's Wyatt?" "Right behind you."
Yeah.
What was it, Ike
Yeah.
or whatever? And then kablamo. And then, oh man, he puts the spurs to his cheek.
Yeah.
I mean, and then gives that speech. "You tell him I'm coming." I mean, I'm just like, that is just so fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, just going big there. I love that.
And that marks the third time in the movie that Ike Clanton just scurries away like the little coward that he is.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, when are they going to get this guy? You know, and you only hear about his thing in the epitaph, right? Like the final
epilogue,
narration. The epilogue. Hey, you know, the other thing I just want to mention, when they jump on the horses and they go, like the scenes when they're riding these things on horseback, like what they did. I want to read more about what the stunt doubles did, and I'm sure that some of the actors probably did their own thing. But such great riding there, and then the thing where he's hanging off the saddle around the front of the horse. I'm just like, that is just so cool. And I mean, and yeah, okay, I know, like, it's all the trick riding, but it's not like a CGI green screen. I mean, you got some guys on horses really doing this stuff. I just love that. It's just fantastic.
And here we have arrived at my main complaint about the movie. I do not like the montage.
Oh, okay.
Really?
I really do not. I like some of the action sequences where they're chasing down the cowboys. There are certain scenes that they put into the montage. There's one in particular where it's simply Kurt Russell, and it looks like he's coming up a hill and he's just firing both guns.
Oh yeah.
And it's supposed to be an iconic image, and I look at it as like Kurt Russell's just walking and just shaking his guns. I think it just looks so silly that for a moment I'm taken out of it. And I think that the montage that's why I call this a 90s Western, is that the montage is towards the end. You have taken such time to really lay out the story, to lead up to the gunfight. And then you get to where the story has really ramped up to the legend of Wyatt Earp and why he is still talked about to this day. And it's montage, fight at the creek, montage. And then we get to Henry Hooker, Charlton Heston's place. And then it breathes for a little bit. But I'm like, the montages, and maybe that was some of the back and forth between Kurt, who was directing, and the editing, and they were just like, maybe that was where the script had breathed a little bit more and told a little bit more story, and they were just like, no, we got to keep this about a 2-hour movie, and let's just cut a lot of this hunting down the cowboy stuff. I think the movie could have benefited from not doing so many montages when they were hunting down the cowboys. That's my only big complaint about the movie. The montages, to me, were not that well done. And again, that's where I think the music for me clanged, because we were getting very much a 90s take on a Western with, to me, the soundtrack I didn't really too much care for, and I just think there were two things fighting against each other that I don't think worked too well.
It's interesting you're talking about the music under the montage. Okay, and it's funny when you say clang, because I think that's exactly what the music was. I think it was almost like that thing at the beginning when they transitioned from the old style film to they called them the Cowboys, and you get that. I think it literally was like basically a lot of percussion, heavy, dissonant, clashing sounds. And I want to say there was clanging going on. It sounded like someone was playing, like when they play like an anvil or a break drum or something. Like, I think there was like metallic clanging going on underneath that montage.
But I mean, playing as Bane together and not really working together.
John. Okay. Interesting.
That's just me. I mean,
sure. No, and it's funny because like I don't even remember the scene where Kurt Russell is walking up a hill firing the guns, right? So I'd be with you on that. Like, hey, if you want to drop those scenes out and just have more like cool stunts on horses, I'd be fine with that. You know, like that would be awesome. But I hear you, and I think that's interesting that's what sets it as like a 90s movie or a 90s Western for you.
I've always kind of felt the same way too. They're like that part for me of a movie where when I say it's the weakest part, I still enjoy it. That for me is the weakest part of the movie. My only pushback on that is if we don't have the montage, then how are we ever going to see Wyatt take off his glasses and let down his hair, and how's he ever going to get to the prom? If we don't get to have the montage, then none of that happens, and we don't end up going from homely Wyatt to gorgeous Wyatt, and then it's not a 90s movie. I just don't know what we'd go from there, but
fair enough.
But no, I agree with you. Like that part of the movie, I think of that part, and Pat, to your point, I love some of the action sequences that are in there, and there are still some other funny parts. There's parts that they break in, and there's some people in a bedroom enjoying each other's company, and somebody goes,
the opium den.
Yeah. And somebody goes, nobody move, and Doc Holliday's like, by all means, move,
please.
But that I think of that part of the movie as in my brain I call it the made for trailer part of the movie, because I feel like that's exactly what that is. Like somebody has already edited this down so that it could be in the trailer and just give you the quick little flashes of, look, here's Kurt Russell walking towards you, firing a gun directly at the screen. You know, here is this quick little scene of them riding their horses and firing, and somebody's like underneath the horse firing a gun, and like all this other stuff. Very, very cool stuff. But in my own brain, I think of that as the made for trailer part of the film. So yeah, if I was going to cut out any part of the movie and say, maybe a little less of that, or a different structure to that, maybe not these quick cut montage type things, you know, give, as we have with the rest of the movie, let some of these scenes breathe, you know, have it be a camera shot that lasts for more than 3 seconds, you know, and let it follow them.
Yeah. I mean, that again, we've had such a very well structured setup all the way up into the gunfight at the OK Corral.
Yeah.
And then even after that, when the cowboys get their revenge and they go after the brothers, it's still it's leading up. And then once we get to the fight at the train station, then it's all right, quick at it. And it just feels like we're hurrying up to the finish at that point. And as much as I love this movie, I don't want to hurry up to the finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, like you said, we have those couple of quick scenes where they go into the house of ill repute and ambush them, and then we have another scene where it was probably only about 20 seconds where guys are smoking in an opium den, and one of them thinks he's getting a pipe, and it's Kurt Russell's gun. I mean, those are really cool inserts into a lot of the guys on horseback. And then even we have a couple of scenes like Pat was saying, where you see Kurt Russell hanging off the side of the horse and then shooting underneath the neck of the horse to hit a guy. You have those, but then there's also a lot of the guys running towards the camera and just firing the guns at nothing. And that's just like, it's too much. Let's go back to showdowns. Let's go back to them hunting down. There were enough of the bad boys of the cowboys that had been introduced at that point, that until we get to Johnny Ringo taking over, you don't have, there's no real stakes. It's them shooting at faceless guys that happen to be wearing the red sashes.
Yeah. Well, and another sign that it's an 80s, 90s movie too, because that scene in the opium den where he puts the gun in his mouth, it's like I thought the narration was interesting, where the voice goes, "This is your cowboy. This is your cowboy on drugs." And then he fires the gun. Any questions? You know, I thought that was a really interesting move to do that in the movie. Have there be like a anti-drug commercial in the movie. I thought that was really cool.
Well played, John.
Did you see Sheriff Behan in one of the final rides? because I had never really noticed it before. And then, but okay, and I saw it this time, and it was like the first time I noticed. Oh yeah, he was riding with him. Which do you ever see him get shot, or do you just kind of assume, or but you just catch a glimpse of him riding with the Cowboys?
Yeah, I don't remember that you ever see him get shot.
Okay.
No, you do not see him get shot, but there is a very clear scene that when he joins up with them, it's when they shoot Morgan and Virgil. That he has joined up with them and he has deputized all of them. And there are a couple of other scenes where you see them ride and he's riding with them. And even before the showdown with Johnny Ringo, he's still riding with them.
Yeah, because he's with them when they realize that they stopped the stagecoach and they've killed the actor. In that scene too, I think you see him there, and yeah. So we are at Doc Holliday does take a turn for the worst, and we get to Henry Hooker's ranch. And I don't know if this ended up being in the director's cut or if it's in any deleted scenes or anything like that. They actually had an actor who had been in a lot of different like 50s and 60s TV shows, was actually in Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. Al Hansen was his name, was supposed to play Henry Hooker. And I actually have a little bit, I think it's an excerpt of the scene where they have like his original take on it. Yeah. Actually, here it is. It's Wyatt walks in and he says, "Where's the First Presbyterian Church on Gordon Street?" He goes, Gordon Street. And he's like, Gordon Street. Yeah, Gordon Street. I once knew a girl who lived on Gordon Street, but that was a long time ago when I was young. And then Wyatt says, "Do we have to put up with this? I mean, can't we get a better actor? I know it's a small part, but I think we can do better than this." And then they bring in Charlton Heston. He's like, "Gordon Street. Ah, yes, Gordon Street. I once knew a girl who lived on Gordon Street long time ago when I was a young man. Not a day passes, I don't think her and the promise I made, which I will always keep, that one perfect day on Gordon Street." That's 5 blocks up, 2 over, and I'm Henry Hooker, and this is my ranch. I thought that was really like a really interesting way to do that scene.
You had to bring Wayne's World into this movie. Not the same, John. They're not the same.
Any chance I get. But we do have Henry Hooker's ranch, and we have kind of that touching scene where Doc Holliday does trick him into giving him his badge, and so he's able to make that, connection with Johnny Ringo at the Grove so that he can be part of that showdown as opposed to Wyatt, because everybody pretty much knows, even Wyatt knows, I can't beat him, can I? And Doc is like, nope, can't. And Doc knows he's the only one that has a chance of beating Johnny Ringo. So he does his hypocrisy only goes so far, but it goes far enough to get him there first. And he is able to take on Johnny Ringo and best him in the showdown.
Now, I've seen something recently pop up, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm just going to say it, that the reason Doc shot Johnny Ringo this side of his head was because he noticed that Johnny Ringo was, of course, right-handed, and that by shooting him up here, it disabled his right hand. So even if he didn't kill him with that hit, he was going to stop him from being able to fire on him. And watching it, I saw it. It's a meme on the social media. It's like tiny details of movies you never notice.
Yeah. So
if that is truly something that was put into the script on purpose, that's absolutely brilliant.
Oh yeah.
But even if it isn't, that's still an amazing scene where he wins it, and then Johnny Ringo just can't do anything. He can't pull his gun up, and he fires off like way away from Doc. It's still great. And then, of course, there's Doc yelling at him, "You're no Daisy. You're no Daisy at all."
Yeah.
Just a great scene.
Yeah. We started a game we never got to finish. I was just fooling around. I wasn't.
Fantastic.
It's so awesome. And then Wyatt shows up, and obviously we've skipped ahead to montage number 2 where everybody gets pretty and goes to the prom. But Wyatt and his posse continue their vendetta ride, and they end up sparing Ike Clanton because Wyatt had set up some kind of Batman rule for himself where if I see a man wearing a red sash, I kill the man wearing it. So his Batman rules are, if you're not wearing the red sash, I can't kill you. So Ike, look at this. Takes it off and throws it in the air, and little Weasley Ike gets away one more time.
Yep, the penguin escapes yet again.
And then we kind of finish everything off with, we have Doc Holliday's death in Colorado when he goes to visit, Wyatt goes to visit him in the hospital. And still, even as he's, the mixture of him, you know he's dying, and you know it's probably the last time they're ever going to see each other. So there's the sadness of that scene mixed with still some of the funny stuff he still says, even on his deathbed. You know, he's just little comments he's making while Wyatt's giving him cards, trying to keep playing with him. And he's, the priest and I were just discussing the mysteries of the Church of Rome. It appears my hypocrisy knows no bounds. He just continues even all the way up until his final scene. Oh, isn't this funny?
Yes, when he looks down and realizes he is not wearing his boots, and he thought he was going to die with his boots on.
Yeah. And then based on Doc's advice, Wyatt goes out, and there's actually a line from that right before he passes. It's not a funny line, but it's one I've even thought to myself or used from time to time. There's no normal life, there's just life. And, kind of taking that advice, the end of the movie is Wyatt goes and seeks out Josephine to kind of start their life together, and has this whole heartfelt, I don't have any money, I don't have anything. And she's like, hey, don't worry, my family's rich. And then you have the ending narration go off at the end to kind of let us know how everything wrapped up, and fade to black, I guess. So what do we, I feel like we're going to do a little bit of the deep thoughts. We've shared some of our deep thoughts and some of our opinions kind of as we've gone along, just as the conversation has naturally flowed. But I do want to ask, before I jump into our shortened deep thoughts segment, anything else? Are there any other scenes that we haven't touched on? Anything that you like, when we're recording this tonight, I got to talk about this scene. I got to talk about this line. I got to.
Just one for me, and it's because I use this every time I am playing cards with my family. And it's the very brief Billy Bob Thornton appearance at the very beginning when they decide that, well, they walk into town and they're talking to, and he says, everything's thriving except for that place. And Wyatt, that's where the scene where, Virgil and Morgan are watching Wyatt. Is like, there he goes, being Wyatt. And he walks in there and he ousts Billy Bob Thornton from the table. But before that, Billy Bob, you hear him in the background, and everything he's saying is just the most annoying. I told you to keep that cigar out of my face. And then he's, as Wyatt Earp is walking up to the table, he says, it's like playing cards with my brother's kids, nerve-wracking sons of bitch. And it's so funny. But even after Kurt Russell has a confrontation with him and pretty much makes him out to be the bully that he is and walks him out of there, that's when Doc Holliday shows up, and they're all talking, and Billy Bob Thornton's just sitting there holding the shotgun in the background, and he's like, "Oh, I remember you." And he's like, "Doc, is that you?" He's like, "Why, sure it is." And they just go on having a conversation, the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday. And Billy Bob Thornton is standing in the background, just holding a shotgun, so confused as to what is going on. And then Doc Holliday's like, "Oh, you can go now."
Oh, Johnny, I forgot you were there.
"Oh, Johnny, you forgot you were there." And leave the shotgun. And he tries to give it to him. He's like, "No, leave the shotgun."
And then,
thank you.
Yeah, and then the thank you at the end. Like, not only does he just leave the shotgun, he say thank you. But I love that when he's walking up, he's got the shotgun, he's going to go right to him, he's going to take a shot at him. And I don't think he doesn't know who any of these people are, so nothing would have stopped him, except out of nowhere comes Doc Holliday, who he recognizes, and goes, "Well, Johnny Tyler, you madcap, where are you going with that shotgun?" Doc, I didn't know you was back in town. Yeah.
That is one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie. Yeah. And it really is. It's watching it again. Every time I watch it, as much as I'm focused on Doc Holliday and the other three leads, Billy Bob Thornton just standing in the background, looking dumbfounded as I don't know what to do here, is phenomenal. And he was not Billy Bob Thornton as we know him now.
Yeah.
By any means. He had not done Sling Blade yet. That was 3 years later.
Yeah.
So he was a nobody. And just to just really take that scene. I mean, all of these character actors. Terry O'Quinn as the mayor. I knew him only from The Stepfather. He's now known for Lost. I mean, he's a huge actor. There's so many actors that were just about to break out. Thomas Hayden Church.
Yeah,
he's Clanton's brother. He dies at the OK Corral, and you see him. He's a baby face in this movie. I mean, there's so many character actors that were not quite anybody yet that show up in this movie.
Yeah,
Stephen Lang had been acting for a long time, but he really didn't blow up until after this movie, and now he's huge. He was in Avatar and like you said, Don't Breathe, and he's a phenomenal in Don't Breathe. And if you get a chance to watch that, he is creepy as all get out in that movie.
Yeah, I love that, and I love a good movie that has slang. I love the slang in The Rocketeer. Like I love the lousy nickel nurser, like stuff like that. So I love that entire scene. And as a kid watching this for the first time, as like a 15, 16-year-old, I thought that whole scene with Wyatt Earp getting up in Johnny Tyler's face when they're in the saloon was just, I'm like, man, if I ever need to get up and just intimidate somebody, they're not going to have any idea what I'm saying, but I wish I could just repeat all these lines. Go ahead, skin that smoke wagon, see what happens. Listen, mister, I'm getting awful tired of your gas. Now jerk that pistol and go to work. I said, he keeps slapping him. I said, throw down, boy. And then my favorite line in that whole scene is, are you going to do something or just stand there and bleed? Like, oh man, if I ever, for some reason, if I ever need to get into a fight for anything, I need to somehow get that line in there.
Before the other guy does.
Right, yeah. Like, I just have to hope my opponent has never watched Tombstone. Because if he says it before me, I'm probably just walking away. All right. Well, we're going to do a shortened version of Deep Thoughts because we've been sharing our deep thoughts. So here's a shortened Deep Thoughts.
And now, Deep Thought.
Okay. All right. So the only thing I'm really going to ask you for Deep Thoughts, because we've been sharing our opinions so far. Stuff going off all over the place. We've been sharing our opinions and everything so far. So the one thing I want to ask you is, before we go into our three questions here in just a moment, is when was the first time you saw this? I'm not going to ask if you like the movie. We've all said we like the movie. We love this movie. Do you remember the first time you saw this? And where was it? Where was it? When was it?
I saw it in the theater when it came out.
Okay.
And then it was one of those that when I was in, I heard you and Pat talking earlier that Pat kind of met a guy in college that kind of introduced him. It was a cinephile that introduced him. Well, that guy was me in my college. I may have not dubbed a lot of VHS tapes over my time when I was during break, summer, spring, winter, or whatever. And I would bring them back, and guys in my fraternity would come to me and was like, hey, do you have this? Do you have this? And none of them asked me about Tombstone. And one night, one of the guys, he was like, is there a newer movie I haven't seen that I really should? And I had Tombstone on VHS. I was like, you might want to check this out. And all of a sudden it became one of the favorite movies in our fraternity. And it's like, I had guys coming back to me left and right asking to check it out and watch it for the night.
When I got to college, I met a guy that was big into movies. And so it was like, we'd always hang out, and he's like, hey, have you seen all this? No, I haven't. Okay. So come on over we'd hang out and get a pizza and watch a movie, or watch as college. So we'd watch one movie or 5 movies or whatever. And this was one of them. And it was just like, this is fantastic. And it's funny because I'm thinking back, why didn't I see this in high school? Why? And it's funny because my dad and my grandfather were both fans of Westerns, but they probably were into the Westerns that they grew up watching. Right. So the newer ones, my dad might've seen Tombstone, maybe not. I remember they saw what was the one with Clint Eastwood?
Unforgiven?
Unforgiven. They saw Unforgiven, and I remember they were just like, my folks saw it and they were just like, yeah, that great movie, but man, not my cup of tea. That was a little intense. It was dark, and they enjoyed it. And so I wonder if that kind of just it kind of took them out of it. So they maybe just chose not to see this. And then I'm thinking back to all my friends, and I'm thinking that most of the movies that they went to go see, I don't know how much into Westerns they are, or they were. So it's like at that time, if my friends weren't into Westerns, I wasn't going to go see it. My dad was into Westerns, but if he wasn't watching it, so it finally took to college when this buddy of mine did it. And now I'm just like, man, why had I not seen that movie more? But yeah, the first time I saw it was college, and early on in college, and didn't look back from there.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. The first time I saw it was at a buddy's house. I was in high school. I was probably a freshman, maybe sophomore. And it was probably after one of our summer football practices, and we went over to, it was a guy that we played football with on the team, and went over to his house to just hang out and watch a movie. And I remember, I feel like we only went to his house maybe a couple of times, but I always, and just because it was so different, like not that necessarily the picture quality was any better than a TV we had at my house or anything like that, but it just was such a different setup that he had in his house. And it was and I've looked it up to try to find exactly what model it was, if I could try to remember. I can't figure out which one it was, but basically what it was a front projection TV. I don't know if you guys ever saw any of these. I think it was a Sony Videoscope is what they called it.
Yes. Yes, I have seen
some of those. And he had that, and he had a Laserdisc player. And so he was the only person I knew that had a TV like this, and the only person I knew that had Laserdisc, because this is still before DVD was out. And this was, he's like, hey, have you guys seen this movie? It's called Tombstone. I haven't seen this movie. So they had the Laserdisc of Tombstone. And so he pops it in, and we're watching this on this big, it's almost like having a little mini movie theater in his basement. And I just thought this was so cool. And we're just watching this movie with the rest of my buddies there. And I'm just like, I love every moment of this. Like every line that these guys are saying, and half of it, I don't even know what they're saying right now, but it sounds so cool. Like I want to find some way in my life to use these lines later on. But that I remember was the first time watching it was at my buddy's house on the front projection, the old school front projection TV, which I understand. I haven't looked up how much they cost. My understanding is they were almost prohibitively expensive. So I don't know if his parents must have bought it years before then, because I know that they were manufactured probably early to mid 80s, and maybe even a little bit beyond. Yeah.
There was a company where I grew up called Theater Vision.
Okay.
And they made these, and they were massive.
Yeah.
They were massive. And going back, the picture quality wasn't that great.
Yeah.
On regular TV. It was when you had your VHS or your camcorder, or in your case, a laser disc hooked up to it. That's where you really saw the picture quality come through, because broadcast television was still very low quality.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember it being so cool. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. Like my TV at home looks great, but this is cool. It's like being in a theater, but in your house. Yeah. No, it was so much fun. And I don't think I knew anybody else at the time that had Laserdisc, which, slight tangent, I saw something the other day. There was like a shop, I think somewhere not too far away from us up in Wisconsin, posted something on a Facebook page, and they're like, hey, for Black Friday, all of our Laserdiscs are 50% off. And they must have known their audience, because the first Laserdisc I spot in the image they've posted on Facebook is The Rocketeer. And so immediately my first response is, how much is a used Laserdisc player? And do I have any time to get to Wisconsin within the next day or so? And if I get a used Laserdisc player, like what other movies am I going to need to buy on Laserdisc? And is this something I can sustain? And what happens if this Laserdisc player breaks? And I'm like, that whole thought for like a good 4 or 5 minutes, it went through my head. And then I was like, no, I think I'm okay.
I understand. I completely understand, because right before, a year before DVDs became a thing, I was at a Circuit City looking at Laserdisc players, and looking at the ones where you didn't have to take the disc out and flip it over or anything, where it was like automatically go to the other side. And I was like, was just about to pull the trigger, and I didn't because I was still in high school. I was getting ready to go to college. But I had heard of the Alien Special Edition, the expanded version of Aliens, and there was a video store near me that rented laser discs, and they had a bunch of extended versions and director's cuts of all these movies. And when I saw the Aliens one, I was like, I gotta see that, gotta see that, gotta see that.
Yeah.
And that kind of set me down that road. And I'm so glad I did not pull that trigger because I have bought several movies many times in all of their formats. I could not. Laser discs were way more expensive than DVDs have ever been. So,
yeah, there was just something in my little the collector portion of my brain that was just like, I wonder. Yeah, well, keep wondering. Because no, we're not doing that. We don't need to add anything else. I've got some 3 questions for us. Is there anything else we want to say about Tombstone before we jump into 3 questions?
Why don't we start doing a commentary? Just start the movie right now. We could just sit here and talk for another 2 hours, 10 minutes.
I think that would be a good idea.
I'm your Huckleberry. You're a daisy if you do. Hey, I'm up for that. I'm fine with that.
Just before, because you just said that, there is controversy, and I looked it up, and it has been confirmed. There was talk for years that what Val Kilmer actually said was, "I'm your hucklebearer," which would make sense. I'm going to carry you to your grave, which a huckle being one of the grasps on a casket to lower somebody, or be a pallbearer. But he said in his book, his autobiography, he said it was written, "I'm your Huckleberry," so therefore it's Huckleberry. However, the one thing that everybody gets wrong is that it's a reference to Tom Sawyer. It is absolutely not, because Tom Sawyer, actually, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn was published 3 years after the gunfight at OK Corral. I confirmed that today before we had this. So that was something that had been out in the ether for a long time. Does he say, "I'm your Huckleberry" or "I'm your Hucklebearer"? Because, of course, Doc Holliday was probably intoxicated most of the time he was talking, so his diction wasn't as eloquent as his verbiage. So, but I just did want to say, for once and for all, Val Kilmer said, "I'm your Huckleberry."
It is Huckleberry, yeah. Yeah, I remember reading about that there was some back and forth on what exactly the term was. All right. Well, it's time for 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Question number 1. What quote do you want on your tombstone?
Are you familiar with the comedian Stephen Wright?
Yes.
One of my favorite lines of his is that I wish my first words were, quote, so that my last words before I depart this land would be, end quote. And that always kind of stuck with me. Cool. Just have closing quotes on my tombstone. But no, especially since I have had a reinvigoration of my love for Edgar Allan Poe, watching the fantastic Netflix series, The Fall of the House of Usher. If I was going to put anything on my tombstone, it would probably be Nevermore.
Nice. Yeah, I enjoyed that so much, especially like the second or third episode, that I just and so much Edgar Allan Poe stuff that I was just like a puddle on the floor.
myself included. He is my favorite author of all time. So getting every reference, my wife was kind of like, "Oh God, here we go again." Because I was like pausing. I was like, "Do you get that? Do you get that?" And she was like, "No, I don't. I don't read him as much as you do."
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting is when I was courting her earlier on in our relationship, we would have late night conversations, and she would be like, "This TV show isn't interesting me." She'd be like, "Could you just talk a little bit longer?" I'm like, "Let me go get something." And I would pull out my compendium of Edgar Allan Poe, and I'm like, "Let me just read you a couple of poems." And two of them were Annabelle Lee and Tamerlane.
Oh yeah.
And then to see what they did with those in the show, interesting.
Yeah. That was.
But I digress.
When I was teaching 7th and 8th grade English, every single year I would use Annabelle Lee as one of the examples of Edgar Allan Poe that I would teach to my students, and I worried a little bit because I think the different superintendents we had must have thought the only thing I ever taught was the Raven, because every single time that a superintendent would come through our school and come into sometimes they'd take these little tours where the administrators would walk into your classroom and we're just going to stand in the back, pretend we're not here, kind of a thing, just to kind of see what's going on with the little people. This would happen. And it was like 3 or 4 years in a row. And we had a bit of turnover for superintendents in our district. So I feel like it was at least 2 or 3 different superintendents. They came into my room every time, it didn't matter what day it was. I had shifted my schedule a little bit, whatever. Every single time a superintendent came into my room to visit, I was teaching Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And when it was the same superintendent that came in 2 times in a row, I walked to the back of the room as the students, I had put on a quick little video clip of something to show the students, and I walked to the back of the room and I said, "Okay, I just want you to know I do actually teach other things. This is not the only thing I cover in my class. Now, I'm going to argue that even if it was, that would be okay. But I do teach other things. It's not just The Raven."
That's funny.
No, that Netflix show was amazing.
I want to also just kind of add in, John, it's funny. I love it when like the superintendent will come through and all that kind of stuff. And our current superintendent, like I get along with him very well. And I always try to say, hey, anytime anybody wants to come in and watch the band rehearsal, blah, 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 blah. But like the superintendent walking into your room and just saying, just pretend like I'm not here. I would imagine, and I was talking to a buddy of mine that actually is serving in the Navy right now, and I mentioned that, my name came up with the superintendent. He just starts laughing. He goes, he's a chief. And he's like, that's like my name coming up with the admiral, right? Like that's like the admiral walking into your compartment and just saying, hey, just pretend like I'm not here. Just carry on. Or the general.
You can't.
No, you can't. No, it doesn't work that way. And so, which is so funny when they say that. And I'm like, if I was ever in that position, would I end up saying the same thing? No, I think I would go in and just say, look, I know it's really awkward. I just want to watch you. Like, I'm not judging you. I know it's going to be awkward. I just like to just own it, but don't walk in and say, just pretend like I'm not here.
That's like, especially when you're dealing with children. You can't do that when you're dealing with children, because invariably it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a superintendent or a complete stranger off the street. Anybody walks into that classroom and stands at the back of the room, immediately at least 20% of that class is going to go, "Who's that?"
I know.
Or the one smart aleck in the class is going to be like, "Oh, this is my time to challenge him, to make him look foolish."
I know.
Yeah.
Whenever we get visitors like that, I always stop. And they're always, "Hey, when we come in, we don't want you to make a big scene." But I was like, I'm stopping. Like, "Hey, everybody, we got some special guests. Everybody turn, say hello to Mr. So-and-so or Dr. So-and-so or whatever." And they're like, "Hey, Pat, in the future, like, we really don't need that recognition." "Oh yeah, no worries. It's all good." Next time they come in. "Okay, everybody, stop. I want you to," it's just like, but you're right. That's exactly what it is when they, just pretend like we're not here. Not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's not,
Jeff and I have this routine that we do if I ever go into his classroom, because we both have like the short hair, the goatee, similar type build, similar height. And whenever I go into his classroom, some of the students from time to time will be like, is that guy related to Mr. Mazuka? And sometimes, like a couple times, we had a kid, I think, asked one year, "Is like, are you guys related?" And we just went with it. And I was like, so as I was leaving his room, I was like, "Hey, Jeff, don't forget about the thing I told you about. And Mom's not happy with you because you have not called her lately. So I'm going to tell Mom you said hi. And so now every once in a while when I leave his room, he's like, okay, tell Mom I said hi. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. And then we'll leave and like, he'll tell me, yeah, as soon as you left the room, I had a bunch of kids be like, is that your brother? Yes. Yes, that's my brother. Yes.
You should take it up a notch and say, we were triplets.
Yeah.
One of them didn't survive the womb.
That would be good. That would be good. We did have as a kid, I had my brother and my sister and I growing up. My mom would always keep one spare bedroom in our house. And for some reason, she chose to decorate it with all the weird, creepy, white Victorian-looking furniture that she had either inherited from her mother or from somebody or whatever. Nobody wanted to ever go into this spare room because it just looked creepy. At least to us kids, it looked creepy. So as my brother got older, we started telling my brother, we're like, well, that's Victoria's room. There used to be 4 kids in the family, and that's Victoria's room. And ever since Victoria fell down the stairs and passed away, Mom just couldn't bear to get rid of her stuff. And so that's why it's decorated like that. It's so from time to time we've pretended to have a missing sibling every now and then. I can't narrow down a quote, so I told my family tonight. I said, you know what, I'm going to go with something that blends my spiritual religious belief. I was reading a book on spiritualism, but that blends my religious belief with the fact that I love movie quotes. And I'm just going to put on my tombstone, I'll be back. Because then I figure that mixes a sense of resurrection with a sense of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and better than the other option. It might be a tumor. ... Yeah, the kids didn't think my other one was funny. My other one was, wait, what is that?
All worthy offerings, John.
That didn't win anybody over. Pat, is yours going to be all musical notes?
Yeah, it could be all musical notes or something like that. It's funny, Bach, my mom being a church organist was very familiar with J.S. Bach and all that kind of thing. And she would talk about what he would always inscribe on his music, just very things when he started composing or when he was done. And he would always, whenever he was done with a piece, he would always either abbreviate it or write out the full Latin. But the translation was, to God be the glory. And I always thought that was like any of those little quotes or sayings or whatever. It takes more thought and reflection just to kind of get into the gist of it. But I always thought something like that, what Bach put on his music when he was done would be a cool epitaph, would be to God be the glory.
Yeah.
That being said, I won't be around, so I suppose that's up to my kids and my wife and whoever else is around after me to put, put on there. That would be up to them. And, I suppose they could even just put like a stamp that says return to sender. It's really up to whichever they want to do it.
Patrick Canagallo, he hated your favorite movie.
He hated your favorite movie. It could have been, well, we just sat down to watch a movie and we thought he fell asleep because or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I play a terrible joke on you and I walk up and chisel something like Pearl Harbor, 4 stars.
That's right. That's right. Oh man, I like Rob's. He hated your favorite movie. That is a pretty good one, man. That is a pretty good one.
I'm gonna jot that a note to self. Text Tammy later.
Yeah, that's
let
right.
her know.
That's right.
Tammy, I don't know what you have planned, but we're superseding your wishes, and here's what we want to have put on Pat's tombstone.
Beloved husband, father, and he hated your favorite movie.
There you go.
He hated your favorite movie. Oh man, that's good.
All right, question number 2. What is your favorite card game?
Any form of poker, really. I'll just leave it at that. When I get together with my family often, we just play poker in many forms. So
yeah.
I can't say any one other than the other.
Okay. That's a good call. I feel like Rob just upped the game and won the podcast because I don't play poker. So I think if I say anything beyond this point, I think it's just going to pale in comparison. don't know what to say. I could say Uno, but Rob just said any form of poker. So I don't know if I should come along and say Uno, that.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm going to say I am terrible at all card games. So I don't know that I have a good answer for this. I'll play them, but I will lose. Like, I guarantee I will lose. There are two things that I know I absolutely will lose at. That is any card game and fantasy football. I'm going to lose at either one of those every single time. So my family was like, when I asked them this question over dinner, they're like, why are you even asking this question? You don't like card games. I said, well, sometimes I enjoy them. I always lose. I just need to go into it knowing I'm going to lose. So they're not my favorite. But we listed
brings
off,
us back to the Alien 3 discussion, John. That's why
you lose, right?
It works. It works for you.
But the difference is I don't win. When it comes to card games, it's even when I lose, I lose. Yeah.
And can I just say, since that came up, I am so happy that has become a running gag in the podcast. And even when you win, you lose. I am so happy. Every time I hear that, I'm like, that is so great. I love it. I love it.
That's when they look back, when they close the book on us, which obviously might be sooner than later, but when they close the book on us, they're going to look back, and that's going to be one of the episodes that changed the pod. You know what I'm saying? Like, like they say in the NFL, the 5 games that changed the game. That's going to be one of the ones that, like, that was outstanding when that movie became like you were quoting like Hobbesian philosophy, and I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh, oh man, that is so good.
Yeah, maybe that's what needs to go on my tombstone.
Maybe even if you win, you lose.
Yeah,
that works.
I could do that, or I could do the Hobbesian stuff, and I could be like, John is a lot like life, nasty, brutish, and short. We could do something like that. Yeah.
Oh man,
we got all kinds of good ideas. I kind of like the even when you win, you lose. That could be good.
I really like that. I really like even when you, and then it could be like you could have like an etching of like a card hand. You know what I'm saying? But it would have to be like one card off, like a straight flush, but like one of the cards is the wrong suit or something like that. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching.
It would be like 4 cards, all different suits, and then like one Uno card.
Yeah, one Uno card. That's exactly it. That's it right there.
Like there's no way you're winning this. Like it's not even in the realm of possibility here.
What was that line when in oh my gosh, the movie with the guy with the place, Ocean's 11, when Brad Pitt is teaching him to play cards, and he's like, guys, check it out, all reds, and he's just like, oh my, that's kind of like, oh man.
Yeah. So favorite card game, the only thing I can think of, I will play card games, but I'm terrible at pretty much all of them. The one card game I have not played in years, and I think we have a box of it somewhere, but my grandfather loved to play this game, and I remember playing it with him when I was a kid, was Rook. And I have not played that game in a really, really long time, but I remember he absolutely loved that game, and I would play with him all the time, and I think we've got a copy of it somewhere, so I got to pull that out and see if I remember how to play that one. But yeah, otherwise, no, I'm pretty hapless when it comes to card games.
Yeah.
Question number 3, who is your favorite legendary figure of the Old West? For this one, I will say, I might just want to say Doc Holliday, because I think
I have to say Doc Holliday.
Because this one is solidified in my brain that even if he's a fraction as cool as he is in this movie, I'll take it.
Yeah, that's a good point. When I was thinking of this question, like, is it Doc Holliday as portrayed by Val Kilmer? Is it Wyatt Earp as portrayed by Kurt Russell? That's or do you go with like, hey, what are the historical figures and all that? So this is not a question rejection, John. This is not I see you getting ready. I see your finger poised. This is not a question rejection, but I interpreted it like I was reading through, and I'll find the one that's the most intriguing that I know very little about is Bass Reeves. And the reason that I'm going to mention that is like I saw the show about him popping up on Paramount Plus.
Haven't watched it yet, but it looks good.
it looks really good. And then when I was researching this question, I found out, oh my gosh, it was a real character. So
he is a real
character.
Well, yeah, when I saw that pop up, if you really like Westerns and you really enjoy modern takes on Westerns, you cannot go wrong with anything that Taylor Sheridan is doing. From Yellowstone to Hell or High Water, movie with Chris Pine that is very, very good. That is kind of a modern take on Bonnie and Clyde, Robin Hood mythos. It is a fantastic movie. But even in Yellowstone, and went back and watched 1883, which is the prequel to Yellowstone. It has Sam Elliott. You want to talk about a Western being done right and being told well, and everything about it, the characters, the period, everything. He just engulfs every detail into his script, he even gets American Indians right. He doesn't shortchange them. He gives them the reverence that they deserve. So Bass Reeves, I'm really looking forward to when it's released. So, and I when I looked it up, I was like, is this another Taylor Sheridan creation? No, that is a phenomenal deep dive that I encourage you to take. So I can only imagine if the series is as good as this guy's life actually was, it'll be great.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
That's on my list when it comes out. I want to watch that one too.
Yeah. And it's funny because all the Yellowstone 1883, 1983, 2022s, whatever, all the different spin-offs and all that kind of stuff. One of them's got Harrison Ford, and so
1921.
1921. Are they all on Paramount, or are they on different? Okay.
They're all on Paramount Plus.
Okay, then I think my Paramount Plus is going to be with us for a little bit longer, and I'm going to get into those.
Start with Yellowstone. You'll have plenty of time to catch up with it. It's 4 seasons. It's on a very distant hiatus for a variety of reasons right now. So 4 seasons of 10 episodes, then go back to 1883.
Okay.
And go from there, because Yellowstone, in the modern era, will inform what's going on in 1883 very well. Not that you could not watch 1883 and absolutely enjoy it, but you'll appreciate it more.
Okay, do it in release order.
Yes,
is what you're saying. Okay.
Yes.
And then I think
when you're
I
done,
heard something.
Then when you're done watching the westerns, go watch The Mayor of Kingstown.
The Mayor of Kingstown, right? That's got Kate Winslet.
It's Jeremy. No, that's
Jeremy Renner.
Jeremy Renner. You're thinking of, is it Mayor of Easttown? There's another show that sounds. I don't.
Is it that close?
It's like almost exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then I'll watch The Mayor of whoever, and I'll just have a picture of Kate Winslet on my phone while I'm watching. We'll make it work. Bottom line is I'm keeping Paramount Plus, and the Bass Reeves show, it sounds like that's very cool. This is all good.
There you go. Yeah, my only other answer than Doc Holliday, just from the stories I've read and this movie and everything else, I had a funny story about when I was in first grade. I was telling my family this tonight. We had an assignment in first grade where we had to write like a sentence or two, and it was on that paper that you get where there's like the lines on the bottom where you can practice your handwriting. It's got like the solid lines and the dotted lines. You practice your cursive handwriting. And then at the top of the page was a blank space for a picture. So you're supposed to write a couple of sentences and then draw a picture up top. And what the teacher wanted us to do was to explain where our names came from. So one page could be your first name and the second page could be your middle name. And so my first and middle name are John Wesley. And so my first page, I drew a picture of my dad and my grandpa, and I think the John from the Bible, and those were like 3 people. I was like, these are the places where my first name comes from. And then my second name, Wesley, I had an uncle whose middle name was Wesley, a great-great-grandfather whose middle name was Wesley, and at the time, we were attending the Methodist Church, which was started by John Wesley, and so that was on the second page. Well, my dad, having a probably similar sense of humor as to what I have, told me to do a third page, and he told me exactly what to write. So on the third page, he said, I want you to draw a picture of an angry cowboy. I said, okay. So I drew a picture as best my little 6 or 7-year-old hands could do. I drew a picture of an angry cowboy. And he said, here's what I want you to write. I want you to write that your parents named you after John Wesley Hardin. And I was like, I don't know who this is. And he's like, well, I'm gonna tell you. Just write. So I don't remember exactly what I wrote down, but I think the only way, and I don't think my mom was present when my dad told me to do this. I think the only way she found out was the phone call that came from the school later, because John Wesley Hardin was like one of the most controversial, deadly gunfighters in the Texas frontier lands. So here's this little first grade kid that comes to school. I was named after a killer.
Yeah, that got the phone call home. Yeah.
And I'm not sure that my mom was super thrilled with my dad, because she knew exactly where that came from. As soon as she got the phone call from the school, I think she knew exactly where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
Probably really funny in the 60s. Not too funny now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, gentlemen, it's probably time to wrap it up. I think we've been talking for longer than the movie itself lasts. So it's probably time to start wrapping things up here. But I really don't know how you get away from not talking for a long time about this movie and being as excited about it as we are, and just as much as we enjoy it. The minor warts and all that this movie has, it is just such a fun. If I was gonna introduce, if an alien dropped in to planet Earth and was like, show me a Western, this might be the first thing I show them. Like, I can't think off the top of my head. Like, if I was good, there might be some others that I would look to, but I'm like, do I show them historically accurate? Do I entertain them? Well, let's just do all. Let's do every single one of those, and let's just entertain and give them something close to history, and let's just have fun with this. You know, because I want it to be memorable too. So I want the aliens to go back to their home planet, telling everybody they see that they're their Huckleberry. Well, yeah. I absolutely love this movie. I will continue to watch this movie at least once a year, every single year. I know I've said before, this was our tradition for a stretch of time where on my wife's birthday, it was we'd get Tombstone pizzas and we'd watch Tombstone, and you know that's been the tradition. So I will continue to watch this at least once a year with my wife. We love this. We quote it all the time. Doc Holliday, I'm going to argue and say one of the greatest film characters of all time. And Val Kilmer, one of the best performances of a film character of all time.
This is his best performance, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. I will second and third that.
And interesting, because in the Val Kilmer documentary that came out a couple of years, maybe a year or two ago,
a couple of years ago,
didn't it say something to the fact that he really was selective about the roles he picked?
Yes.
Am I inventing that, or do I remember that correctly? That he really selected certain roles. So
yeah, even when he kind of ran into some money trouble, he still was pretty selective about the type of roles he would take on. And there were some that he ended up regretting. Some he worked Batman, for example.
Yeah.
He was excited to play Batman, but he ended up completely regretting it because of the experience. But yeah.
Well, he sure knocked it out of the park here.
Absolutely. Well, our next few episodes, we are still kind of in the middle of our Good Eatin' month, and this actually ends the trifecta of movies that are the namesake of Good Eatin' month. We had Alive, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and Tombstone. And then for the rest of this month, we've got Son-in-Law is going to be next week, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Enter the Dragon from 1973. And then our Patreon movies this month are Heart and Souls from 1993. Patreon shorts will be It Started in 93, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and It Ended in 93, The Wonder Years. And then January, we're hopping on into 1994. So in January, we've got Law and Order month is how we're starting things off. Our Patreon will be Seven Samurai from 1954. And our Patreon short will be Stephen King's The Stand from 1994. And then our regular episodes for the month of January will be Naked Gun 33 1/3, Beverly Hills Cop 3, The Getaway, The Chase, and we'll follow it up with another Wyatt Earp movie. We'll do Wyatt Earp at the end of January. So, and that one I have not seen. So I have not seen Wyatt Earp, and what I understand, and I don't want to color it too much, but what I understand is this movie is shorter and better.
Actually, it's the opposite.
Really? You like Wyatt Earp more than Tombstone?
No, Wyatt Earp is longer and not as good.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. Like this movie Tombstone is shorter and better than Wyatt Earp. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's what I've heard from folks who have seen it and have told me what to expect. They're like, yeah, no, Tombstone's better. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I'm still watching for the podcast, and I probably will still enjoy it somewhat, but I don't know that I'm going to enjoy anything quite as much as I enjoy Tombstone. All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much. We always have a good time when you're here with us, and any opportunity. I know, like we said, we usually have you on in October, and the minute you kind of piped up and said, "Hey, you guys are doing Tombstone, right?" I'm like, yeah. Why don't you join us? Like that'll be fun. But yeah, no, always have a good time talking movies with you. Always appreciate your take and insights on everything. And yeah, is there anything that you want to plug or anything you want to share with everybody before you go?
No. Again, I'm always appreciative of the entertainment you guys bring. I listen every single Wednesday around lunchtime. I am opening up my podcast device, and I'm making sure I've downloaded the latest episode to make sure that I'm listening to it on my lunch break. I look forward to it every week. You guys are incredibly entertaining. Even if you're trashing a movie I like, or you're just lukewarm on something I like, or you're trashing something I absolutely hate, I love it. Or if you're giving praise to something that I like, and you in many cases you've given me pause to go back and revisit something that I may not have given much attention to or may not have even seen. So I appreciate everything you guys do. You guys are friends sitting around talking about movies, and that's something that I've done most of my life. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about something I love, that we love. And so I appreciate it every single time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks,
sometimes,
man.
yeah.
Thank you.
And sometimes we give ourselves pause.
Yeah.
As we're talking through something, like, wait a minute, did I like that as much as I thought I did, or did I hate that as much as I thought I did? And that's been kind of the fun thing about doing the show too, is going back and things that you watch and you're like, I absolutely hate that movie, and then you kind of go back to it and I'm like, maybe I don't hate it.
Wasn't that bad?
Yeah, it's maybe not that bad. Or things that I absolutely love, and I go back and I watch. Wow, what in God's name was I thinking? Case in point, Super Mario Brothers. Oy. Yeah, rewatched that one fairly recently. I was like, I remember as a kid, I loved this movie. I thought this was amazing, and this is the first time I'm watching it since I probably had facial hair. And I'm watching this movie going, don't worry, my Zoom call's not frozen. Like that was the look on my face as I started to watch this movie. And I'm like, there's that time travel dilemma. Like if you went back in time and killed Hitler, would that make things worse? If I go back in time and kill young John for having watched this movie, does it make things worse? And then do I exist to go back in time and kill young John? I don't even know.
3 amazing A-list actors.
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper, John Leguizamo, Bob Hoskins.
Yep.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
But that's another story for another time.
Yeah. It was like they crawfished and drilled that old devil in the whatever, and they made some kind of a deal with him, and it didn't quite work out. That's what happens when you crawfish the devil after making a deal. You end up with Super Mario Brothers. That's what I'm going to say. That's my headcanon on what's going on. Real fast, Pat, before I play the music to get us out of here, I just want to check on something, because you told me earlier when I was about to hit the button and you're like, this is not a rejection. This is not a rejection. Mm-hmm. Were you trying to explain to me what a rejection was? As if I don't know what you rejecting a question sounds like. Were you Pat-splaining me? You've been Pat-splained.
Oh, man, and we get the drop in.
I had to get at least one of them in.
You get the drop in, exactly.
You tried to preempt me on the rejected the question one, so I had to.
I wanted, because sometimes you get a little bit hair trigger with that. You know what I'm saying? You get it's just like, okay, now this question, Pat has rejected your question. Well, hang on a second. So I just wanted to get out in front of it.
Yeah. Pat, even when you lose, you win.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know how that fits, but all right. Well, everybody, if you obviously we've ruined the whole thing for you if you haven't seen Tombstone, but we invite you to go watch it multiple times because it is amazing. So if you have not seen Tombstone at this point yet, I know that we've pretty much given away the entire plot, but please go check it out. It is an amazing movie. See it on the biggest possible screen you can. This is one, if it ever came back to theaters, I would be there in a heartbeat to go check this one out in the theater. But yeah, so thank you, Rob. Thank you, Pat, so much for being here. Just have so much fun talking movies with you all. And everybody, be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.